Chapter 5260. Then what about before? Lin Yi continued to ask. In fact, when he thought about it carefully, he also had this strange feeling just now, but it had never appeared before. Before? I went through it once when I followed him in before, and I've forgotten what it felt like. Duanmu shook her head with a bitter smile. She couldn't be blamed for this. Lin Yi was able to detect this slight abnormality not entirely because of his keen perception, but mainly because he had repeatedly entered and exited it several times before to ensure his escape route. Duanmu only went through it once, so naturally she couldn't detect it. However, even if Lin Yi noticed this slight abnormality, it was useless because he couldn't trace the source of this abnormality. Since he couldn't even find the source, there was no way to talk about the so-called countermeasures. Let's explore it first. Lin Yi said and took the lead to walk forward, but after taking a few steps, he stopped. Duanmu was a little puzzled when she saw this, but when she took a look at the scene in front of her, she was also shocked. The big tent was still the same big tent, and all kinds of decorations were no different from the real world. Whether it was the spatial layout or the scenery, there was nothing unusual. However, it was the lack of any abnormality that was the biggest abnormality. Don't forget that Lin Yi had killed the water lotus in this place, but there wasn't that incomplete body in front of him, nor was there any remains from the explosion of the pure chi pill firebomb. Instead, it was clean, without a speck of dust. Isn't this the mirror world just now? Duanmu couldn't help but look like she had seen a ghost, but at the same time, she felt a little lucky. If this was not the mirror world, could it be the real world? No matter who was in this situation, they would inevitably have a trace of luck in their hearts. Even Lin Yi was no exception. Unfortunately, after he and Duanmu went out for a walk, this trace of luck was immediately shattered. This was not the original mirror world, nor was it the real world, but another mirror world. Not only that, but this mirror world also had no flaws. It still only had the tent as the only entrance and exit. Back in front of the tent, Lin Yi and Duanmu fell into silence at the same time. The situation was getting more and more complicated and inexplicable. At the same time, they were more and more at a loss. Not only were there mirror worlds on both sides, but the mirror world was not the original one. What was going on? After a long time, Duanmu raised her head and looked at Lin. Although she didn't speak, it was obvious that she was asking Lin Yi what he should do next. Let's keep trying. Lin Yi looked thoughtfully at the tent in front of him. Since he couldn't find any flaws, he could only continue experimenting. Only when he figured out a certain pattern would he be able to find a way to break it. With that, Lin Yi was about to step through the tent, but he suddenly paused at the last moment. He took out a piece of clothing from the space in the jade pendant and threw it on the ground. This was the clothing of a girl in the secular world. In this mirror world, it was a unique symbol. Duanmu immediately understood Lin Yi's intention and said, "You want to verify if this mirror world will become another one later?" "That's right." Lin Yi nodded. At this moment, he already had a bold guess, and this piece of clothing should be able to prove it to a certain extent. It's just a piece of clothing that doesn't necessarily mean anything. Why don't we temporarily separate and use a living person like me as a symbol? Wouldn't it be more reliable? Duanmu suggested boldly. Lin Yi shook his head decisively. He looked at the mirror world around him and smiled bitterly. If I'm not wrong, when we return to this place again, this piece of clothing will most likely disappear. If that's the case, once you and I are separated, it will be very difficult for us to meet again. Duanmu was shocked when she heard this. In this kind of situation, it was much better for the two of them to be together than to fight on their own. Especially for her, if she followed Lin Yi, she would have a chance of escaping, but if she was alone, her chances of survival would be really slim. Sure enough, as Lin Yi expected, when he brought Duanmu through the tent and back, the piece of clothing he had just left behind had indeed disappeared without a trace. This was another brand new mirror world. What exactly did you see? Duanmu couldn't help but ask. I think I know why I can't get rid of that strange feeling after going through the tent. Lin Yi paused before changing the topic. Have you looked at yourself in the mirror? Yeah. Lin Yi said. Of course. Duanmu looked puzzled. Then have you looked in 2 mirrors at the same time? Lin asked again. Looking in 2 mirrors at the same time? Duan Muyu didn't understand for a moment. It was only when Lin stretched out his hand and gestured that he understood. Lin meant that he was standing in the middle of 2 large mirrors facing each other, reflecting each other. You mean that a mirror can only reflect one mirror world, but if there are 2 mirrors facing each other, they can reflect countless mirror worlds? Duan Muyu understood immediately. Lin Yi's guess was quite in line with the current situation. Other than this possibility, it was hard to explain anything else. That's right, this is the source of that strange feeling I was talking about. When I was confirming my escape route, I was going back and forth between the real world and the mirror world, but now I'm going back and forth between 2 mirror worlds. The 2 are different. Lin Yi explained. That difference is negligible. Your perception is so sharp? Duan Muyu was surprised. Although she didn't experiment as many times as Lin Yi, she still remembered a general idea. Even if there was a difference between the 2, it was at most 1,000th or even 1/10,000th. Lin Yi was actually able to accurately capture this point and reverse engineer the conjecture of 2 mirrors. Such insight was simply incredible. I'm just a primordial spirit. If I don't even have this little perception, wouldn't I be useless? Lin Yi smiled. But I still have a question. If there are really 2 mirrors like you said, why is its corpse gone and the clothes you just lost gone? Duan Muyu asked with a frown. 2 mirrors could explain the source of these mirror worlds, but this still couldn't be explained. If these mirror worlds reflected each other, in theory, as long as any one of them changed, the others should also change. It wouldn't be indifferent, right? Chapter 5261. No matter what has happened in these mirror worlds, as long as the real world, which is the original reflection, has not changed, then everything will continue to be calm. No matter what has happened, as long as we go out and come back, what we see will always be a mirror world that is exactly the same as the real world outside. Lin Yi's tone was quite certain when he said this. Duan Muyu looked Lin Yi up and down without blinking, until Lin Yi felt uncomfortable all over. She suddenly laughed bitterly. I used to think that Ling Tianyu and the others were the limit that geniuses could reach, but I didn't expect that I was still a frog in the well. You really are a monster. It was still acceptable if Lin Yi was only strong, but even his insight was so abnormal. This really made people feel helpless. Duan Muyu had never been a person who would easily admit defeat. Even people like Lang Lang and Ling Tianyu, who were peerless talents, could only make her feel pressured at most. However, facing Lin Yi now, she really felt a little inferior. You flatter me. Lin Yi smiled embarrassedly. Not at all. Duan Muyu shook her head, but then she was stunned and said in surprise, Huh? Why is there an echo? It's not an echo. The voice just now belonged to the water lotus protector. Am I right? Lin Yi looked around and said, Wonderful, very wonderful. To be able to deduce your own situation so quickly, you are indeed extraordinary. You are the first human in history to do so. The water lotus protector's voice sounded again, but it came from all directions, and for a moment, it was impossible to determine its location and direction. It's still alive? Duan Muyu was shocked. Lin Yi was not surprised at all. From the moment he discovered the second mirror world, he had actually concluded that this guy must be still alive, but he had not pointed it out. Of course I'm still alive. Madam, you are too naive. After all, I am a dignified water lotus protector. How can I be killed so easily? But then again, this human sneak attack just now could be said to be perfect. If it wasn't for my special ability, he might really have succeeded. Protector Water Lily said with a smile that was not a smile. It sounds like you're very proud of yourself, Lin Yi said. Human, you're wrong. I'm not proud, I'm excited. It's been a long time since I've met an opponent who knows what's good for them. The other losers showed their true colors as soon as they came in, and they couldn't even withstand a single blow. It's a waste of my brilliant moon's reflection. It doesn't feel good to play a lute to a cow. Hearing this, Lin Yi couldn't help but be amused. Sir, are you saying that I'm your soulmate? Of course, the saddest thing in the world is to be alone. I have such a mysterious and profound ability, but no one can appreciate it. Don't you think it's a waste? Protector Water Lily said with a hint of pride in her voice. Hearing this, Lin Yi and Duan Muyu couldn't help but look at each other speechlessly. They didn't know that this guy was so good at self-pity. Human, to be honest, I quite admire you. I originally planned to kill you two adulterers, but now I've changed my mind. I'm going to trap you like this and let you spend the rest of your life admiring my moon's reflection, Protector Water Lily said. Hearing this, Lin Yi was stunned, but he ignored the second half of this guy's words. He quickly turned his head and looked at Duan Muyu. We're adulterers? Duan Muyu recalled the situation just now and smiled bitterly. In the eyes of the world, even if the two of us aren't adulterers, I'm afraid we're not far from it. Indeed, just based on the fact that Lin Yi had hugged him in a hurry and Duan Muyu was only wearing his underwear, the accusation of adulterers was no longer unjust. I'm sorry for ruining your reputation, Lin Yi apologized. It's all right, I should thank you instead. Duan Muyu bowed. Seeing the two of them being polite, Protector Water Lily couldn't stand it anymore and said angrily, Hey, you still don't understand your situation, do you? Of course not. Didn't you confirm my suspicions just now? Lin Yi asked faintly. That's right, human, you've indeed guessed the principle of the moon's reflection, but what's the use? Can you find a way to break it? Protector Water Lily said fearlessly. Not yet. Lin Yi was very honest. This was the truth. Even if he guessed that this was the result of two mirrors, finding the original real world was easier said than done. This was almost an unsolvable proposition. Just because you know there's no way to break it, you're going to give up? That's a wise choice, Protector Water Lily said mockingly. Which eye of yours can see that I'm giving up? Lin Yi still had a smile on his face. Apart from giving up on yourself, can you do anything else? Protector Water Lily sneered. Who knows? This isn't a difficult thing to do. What if I'm lucky and accidentally run into a dead mouse? Lin Yi said calmly. It's not a difficult thing? Haha, I really admire you more and more, human. Alright, I'm bored anyway, so I'll take a good look at how you run into a dead mouse. Protector Water Lily laughed loudly. Don't worry, I won't let you be bored. Before Lin Yi finished speaking, he suddenly disappeared, giving Duan Muyu a big fright. She thought it was Protector Water Lily's trick, but it was the opposite. In the next moment, Lin Yi's figure suddenly appeared at the top of the tent, and in front of him stood Protector Water Lily in her human form. They were only one step away from each other. Protector Water Lily was stunned for a moment. Only then did he finally realize that Lin Yi had said so much to him just now in order to lock onto his position and launch another sneak attack. He was really cunning. Wishful thinking. Protector Water Lily laughed loudly. It was understandable that Lin Yi had succeeded in his sneak attack because he was not sure of Lin Yi's existence, so he was not mentally prepared. This time, he was already on guard. If Lin Yi still succeeded in his sneak attack, it would be too unreasonable. Protector Water Lily immediately rushed forward. This was the mirror world that he had personally created, and he was like a fish in water here. His strength was much higher than outside, and his speed had more than doubled. Chapter 5262. Boom. It was another mutilated corpse. It's dead again? Looking at the familiar scene in front of him, Duan Muyu couldn't help but stare blankly. It had been knocked down by Lin Yi twice in a row. Wasn't this water lily protector a little too cowardly? It's not that easy. This should just be a little toy. This guy is deliberately playing hide and seek with us. Lin Yi shook his head lightly. What's next? Duan Muyu asked. Now that the situation was clear, they were still at a loss on how to get out. They couldn't think of a countermeasure at all, which made them even more frustrated and powerless. If we want to crack these two mirrors, we definitely won't be able to find the real world if we look for them one by one. That way, we will only fall deeper and deeper. Lin Yi pinched his chin thoughtfully. But we can't just sit here and wait for death, can we? Duan Muyu frowned. There's only one way. As long as we use brute force to break these two mirrors, these mirror worlds will collapse on their own. Lin Yi's eyes lit up. This was the simplest and most brutal way of thinking. Once the mirror was broken, there would naturally be no mirror worlds. Use brute force? Is that possible? Duanmuyu was full of doubts. If he wanted to break the mirror with brute force, he had to be far more powerful than the water lily protector. However, the other party was at least standing at the top of the golden core stage. If he wanted to do this, Lin Yi would have to be a nascent soul stage old monster. Unfortunately, not only was Lin Yi not a nascent soul stage old monster, he wasn't even a golden core stage master. He was only at the perfected foundation establishment stage. Impossible. Lin Yi's answer was quite discouraging. Then isn't there no other way? Duanmuyu looked at him and said, not necessarily. Lin Yi pondered for a moment and said slowly, the principle of this mirror is as I said just now, it's two mirrors that contrast each other, but after all, it's not really two mirrors. What do you mean? Duanmuyu was confused. Tracing back to its roots, these mirror worlds were created by its ability. I dare say that its main body must be hiding in these mirror worlds, Lin Yi speculated. You're looking for its main body? Duanmuyu suddenly understood. I'm afraid this is the only way out. It's not realistic for us to return to the real world just like that. We can only find its main body, Lin Yi decided. But, how do we find him? Duanmuyu asked. She also knew that only by finding Protector Water Lily's true body would there be a chance. But how could she find so many mirror worlds? Let's try our luck. Lin Yi smiled meaningfully. Trying my luck? Duanmuyu looked at him with a puzzled expression. If he could find the true body of the water lily purely by relying on luck, he might as well try his luck and get out. Was that even possible? Follow me closely. Lin Yi didn't explain much and led the way through the tent. Although Duanmuyu didn't understand why, she knew that there must be a deeper meaning behind his actions, so she immediately followed closely. But this time, before she could completely pass through the tent, Lin Yi suddenly retracted his foot and at the same time, pulled her back. What? Duanmuyu was shocked. She thought that Protector Water Lily had taken the opportunity to attack her. It wasn't until she realized that it was Lin Yi that she relaxed and asked in surprise, "What are you doing?" "Look for yourself." Lin Yi pointed behind him. Duanmuyu took a look and couldn't help but ask in surprise, "Why is the corpse gone?" This was different from before. Previously, the two of them had completely traversed through another mirror world and then came back. What they saw was a brand new mirror world, but the one in front of them clearly still had the remains of Lin Yi's true chi pill firebomb, and the two of them hadn't completely left just now, which was enough to prove that this mirror world was the original one. However, the mirror world was still the original mirror world, and the incomplete corpse of Protector Water Lily had disappeared. It seems that our luck is not bad. Lin Yi nodded. Well, good luck. What the hell is going on with the corpse? Duanmuyu asked with a frown. She thought that her IQ wasn't bad, but in the face of today's situation, she really couldn't keep up with the rhythm. From time to time, she would be confused. If I'm not wrong, that corpse should have been taken back by its main body. Otherwise, I'm afraid that abandoning it would be an unforgivable waste of energy. Lin Yi's mouth curled up slightly. It was taken back by its main body? Duanmuyu thought for a moment and couldn't help but think deeply. That's right, in this place, apart from us, there's only Protector Water Lily. The only one who would do something to that corpse is itself. If it hadn't given me the hint, I wouldn't have realized this. The lotus root is broken, and the thread is still connected. Lin Yi laughed. This time, it was really that guy who had shot himself in the foot. If it hadn't shown its ability to connect even when the lotus root is broken, he really wouldn't have thought in this direction. But even so, I'm afraid this isn't of any substantial help to us. Why do you say that our luck is not bad? Duanmuyu was still a little surprised. Oh, because I just did something to its corpse. If it didn't take back the corpse, my actions would have been in vain, and it would have been extremely difficult for us to find its main body. As for now, Lin Yi didn't continue, and just chuckled with a somewhat profound expression. Duanmuyu was delighted when she heard this, and tactfully didn't ask what he had done. It wasn't that she didn't want to know, but that Lin Yi naturally had his reasons for not telling her. Once he did, what if the water lily heard him? Although the clone in this mirror world had been dealt with, who knew if it had other means of monitoring them? At the end of the day, these mirror worlds were all its territory, and they had to be careful with their every move and every word. From now on, you have to follow me closely. No matter where I go, you must not hesitate at all. Otherwise, if we're not careful, we'll be separated into two mirror worlds. When that happens, it'll be troublesome. Lin said seriously. Once the two of them were separated here, it would be more difficult to find each other than to find the water lily's main body, or even the real world. The chances of them reuniting here were almost zero. I understand. Duan Muyu nodded heavily. All right, then I'll begin. As Lin spoke, he immediately passed through the tent, and Duan Muyu followed closely behind. However, as soon as Duan Muyu stepped out of the mirror world, she found that Lin had retreated, and she hurriedly returned to the mirror world behind her. Chapter 5263. Not bad, we're close. Lin said without rhyme or reason. Duan Muyu had no idea what he was talking about. She looked at Lin Yi's back with an even more unfathomable gaze. She couldn't help but mutter in her heart, this man is really unfathomable. Duan Muyu didn't dare to disturb Lin. He stood in front of her and pondered for a moment, then suddenly walked forward. The two of them directly passed through the tent and came to the mirror world on the opposite side. So far away? Lin frowned slightly, then turned around and passed through the tent again. This time, he did not directly pass through to the mirror world on the opposite side. Instead, he waited for Duan Muyu to follow him out and then retreated like before. A little further. Lin thought for a while, then without saying a word, he passed through to the mirror world on the opposite side. When he stood still, a smile suddenly appeared on the corner of his mouth. Sure enough, it's a lot closer. Duan Muyu, who was following behind him, still had a puzzled look on her face. Not only did she not figure out what was going on, but she was even more confused. What was going on? Unfortunately, at this time, no matter how eager she was, she didn't dare to ask rashly. She could only follow behind Lin mechanically. The only thing she had to do was to keep up. She only needed to know that Lin had figured out a certain pattern and was getting closer and closer to the target. Next, Lin Yi's actions became more and more incomprehensible. He basically brought Duan Muyu out and back again and again. He repeated this countless times until Duan Muyu was about to get dizzy. Finally, he stopped. Aren't we going? Duan Muyu asked carefully. If she only had some simple admiration for Lin before, then now she had a bit of worship. This kind of worship was probably similar to the worship of a bad student facing a top student. There's no need to go, we're already there. Lin looked back and smiled. You mean? Duan Muyu was stunned when he heard this. Then he reacted and was shocked. You mean you found its main body? Lin nodded and directly walked out of the tent. Duan Muyu followed closely behind. He glanced at the familiar scene in front of him and said, this is no different from those mirror worlds from before? Of course there's no difference because this is just one of the many mirror worlds. The only special thing is that the guy's real body is hidden here, Lin said confidently. Really? Duan Muyu looked carefully again and again, but he didn't find anything strange. He couldn't help but ask doubtfully, how do you know that its main body is here? Just watch and you'll know. Lin smiled mysteriously as he brought Duan Muyu to the giant tree hole where the stairway was. There was a sizable pond here, and he pointed at a small water lily on the surface of the pond. Here, this is it. This is the guy's main body? Duan Muyu's eyeballs almost popped out. The water lily in front of him was surprisingly small, only the size of a normal person's palm. Even if it was placed in front of him, he wouldn't notice it. Could this be the water lily protector's main body? Yes, it is. Seeing that Duan Muyu didn't believe it, Lin casually blasted a 5 elements killing chi at the water lily, but it didn't cause any damage when it hit it. It was obvious that there was a layer of faint ripples that blocked it and easily resolved it. Although he still found it a little unbelievable, Duan Muyu already believed that this small, unassuming water lily should be the water lily protector's main body. Sure enough, a figure suddenly appeared on the small water lily. It was the water lily protector in human form. It gave Lin a thumbs up across the pond. Amazing! Amazing! You actually found this place. It seems that my praise for you was too conservative. You are the only one in history to be able to reach this step. You are indeed a talent. You flatter me. Lin Yi smiled faintly. The water lily protector didn't attack immediately. Instead, it sat down on its small water lily and looked at Lin Yi with interest. I'm very curious how you found me. How did you know that my main body is here? Guess. Lin Yi wasn't interested in explaining everything to it. If he wanted to get out of here today, this water lily protector was a powerful opponent that he had to overcome. At this time, it would only be good for him to keep it in suspense and make it feel unfathomable. In fact, Duan Muyu was also very curious about this question. Unfortunately, even though she had followed Lin Yi all the way, she was still confused about this question. Let me guess? Okay, then I'll guess. The water lily protector didn't seem angry at all. It said in a low voice, "My moonlight in the mirror has no flaws. If you relied on yourself, you shouldn't be able to find me in this lifetime." You're that confident? The corners of Lin Yi's mouth curled up. Although that was what he said, even he had to admit that even if this fellow's moonlight in the mirror was not as flawless as it claimed, it was indeed an extremely unsolvable illusory existence. It was almost impossible to find its flaws for no reason. Of course, if I didn't even have this little bit of confidence, how could I enter the eyes of that lord? The water lily protector grinned and continued to analyze. Since the moonlight in the mirror has no flaws, then there's only one problem. It must be me. You must have found some clues on me and found your way here, right? Lin Yi looked at it with a smile that wasn't quite a smile. My weakness should be in the two doppelgangers I sent out. To be precise, it should be in the second doppelganger. At this point, the water lily suddenly paused, and then her eyes lit up. You used my broken lotus connection, right? Lin Yi's heart skipped a beat. This water lily protector was not simple. It had actually deduced this with just a few words. Duan Muyu still hadn't reacted. Lin Yi had indeed said that the broken lotus root was still connected. She also knew that Lin Yi was using this to make a fuss, but she didn't know how Lin Yi had done it. Soon, the water lily protector revealed the mystery. Divine sense imprint. You actually left a divine sense imprint on my clone's corpse. Wonderful. It's a pity that you didn't become a detective with your keen insight. Lin Yi said lightly. This was not a pure joke. This fellow was actually able to deduce the truth on his own in such a short period of time. Ordinary people really couldn't do that. Chapter 5264. Simply put, Lin Yi had left an undetectable divine sense imprint on the corpse of the other party's second doppelganger. When the other party retrieved the doppelganger's corpse, the divine sense imprint would naturally be transferred to the main body. In this way, Lin Yi had found a clear coordinate in the countless mirror worlds. Next, with the coordinates of the main body, he could further explore the rules of these mirror worlds, and finally come here. Otherwise, even if Lin Yi's divine sense was sharp, he would not be able to find any rules. Just as the water lily had said, the moon in the mirror was unsolvable. However, although it sounded easy, the process of exploring the rules was actually not easy. For most ordinary people, even if they knew the coordinates of the main body, it was difficult for them to further explore any rules. The world could be roughly divided into three types of people. 99% of the people could only understand 100 numbers after watching people count from 1 to 100. These were the ordinary people. Among the remaining 1%, 99% of the people could derive the next 99 numbers on their own after knowing the number 1. These were the talents. The remaining 1% of the people could find the number 1 on their own, much less the next 99. These were the geniuses. There was no doubt that Lin Yi could be classified as a genius. Although Duan Muyu was a little worse, he was at least a real talent. Thinking back to what Lin Yi had done just now, she could also sum up the rules of the moon in the mirror. Just as Lin Yi had said at the beginning, the principle of the moon in the mirror was that two mirrors were compared to each other, and the body of the water lily was hidden in one of the mirror worlds. Every time Lin Yi passed through a mirror world, he could calculate the distance between them through the divine sense imprint on it. There was a very basic and intuitive rule in the arrangement of these mirror worlds, which was that they were arranged on the left and right sides of the two mirrors. After the first few tests, Lin Yi quickly understood another basic rule. If he went straight through the tent, he would enter the mirror world on the opposite side. If he went backwards, he would enter the mirror world on the same side. As long as he figured out this pattern, the next step was to keep experimenting and gradually get closer to his final goal. Lin Yi did this, but Duan Muyu didn't know about the spiritual awareness imprint before, so she was confused. Otherwise, she should have realized it a long time ago. Detective? What do you mean? Protector Water Lily was stunned. Oh, it's a profession that relies on your brain to make a living. Only smart people can do it. You might even have the chance to become a famous detective, Lin Yi said playfully. It's very simple for you to think this through. It was only because I was careless that you succeeded. Otherwise, if I had carefully checked and removed your divine sense imprint, you would have been at a loss. The water lily began to regret her mistake. Does this count as hindsight? Lin Yi glanced at him. Hindsight is wise? What the hell is that? The water lily obviously didn't know who Zhuge Liang was, but she didn't really care about these details. Instead, she said, speaking of which, although your idea is simple, it's really difficult for ordinary people to do this. Without such fast reaction and insight, even if you can think of this method later, you won't have a chance. Moreover, even with the spiritual awareness imprint as a reference, it's difficult for ordinary people to use it to figure out the internal rules of my mirror flower, water moon. Again, you're a talent. I'm flattered that you think so highly of me. Lin Yi said lightly. Wrong, I don't have the habit of praising people. I always tell the truth. I said before that I would trap you here for the rest of your life, but now I've changed my mind. I plan to recruit you to be my assistant. What do you think? The water lily suddenly said. You want to recruit me? Lin Yi and Duan Mu looked at each other when they heard this, and both of them revealed strange expressions. Of course, special people get special treatment. It's rare to meet such a smart friend like you. If I kill you just like that, wouldn't it be a pity? The water lily looked at Lin Yi with a hint of admiration in her eyes, but it wasn't admiration on an equal level. Instead, it was more like she was admiring an antique. If that's the case, shouldn't I be flattered? Lin Yi's expression suddenly became even more playful. You should be flattered. You should have died here, but now I've given you a way to live, and it's a way to enjoy endless glory and wealth. You're a smart person, so you should know that this kind of good thing is rare in the world. If you miss this opportunity, you won't get it again. The water lily gave him an ultimatum. What if I say no? Lin Yi asked. Then only death awaits you. We're both smart people, so you shouldn't be so untactful, right? The water lily's tone gradually became cold. I'm sorry, but I really don't know how to write the word untactful. Lin Yi said calmly. The water lily looked at him deeply and sneered, Don't tell me you're still thinking about getting lucky? Do you really think that you'll have a chance to escape just because you found my real body? I can only say that you're too naive, human. It's indeed impressive that you were able to find this place, but it's useless. Is that so? Lin Yi chuckled disapprovingly. The water lily was stunned when she saw this, and couldn't help but feel a little puzzled. Did this human have some other life-saving trump card? Of course, she knew that Lin Yi wasn't a fool. Since he dared to treat her like this, he must have something to rely on. He couldn't possibly be seeking death. What are you laughing at? The water lily frowned for the first time. No particular reason, I just think it's funny. Lin Yi shrugged and Duan Muyu smiled. To be honest, she had been quite nervous since just now. After all, she was facing the water lily's real body, and it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that she was under a lot of pressure. But now that she saw Lin Yi like this, she couldn't help but relax a lot. Funny? Don't forget that this is still within the range of the moon's reflection. This is my world, and I'm the only ruler. The water lily sneered. Chapter 5265. In terms of might, the 2 true Chi-Core firebombs were already the limits of what he could produce. Throwing 2 at once was no joke. If it were a spirit beast at the level of the primordial Gomong King, it would definitely die. Although the water lily protector in front of him was in existence at the same level as the brain-eating worm and was much stronger than the ancient Gomong King, it was obviously a skill-based spirit beast. In theory, It would not have a thick skin like the brain-eating worm. Perhaps the difficulty in dealing with it was to find its main body. Perhaps its main body was not much stronger than its avatar, and 2 real chi pill firebombs could easily deal with it. As a result, the water lily protector showed a contemptuous smile on its face. It seemed to have made up its mind to open Lin Yi's eyes. Seeing this, it did not dodge or counterattack, but let the 2 real chi pill firebombs hit its body. Lin Yi and Duanwuyu's eyes widened at the same time. However, the next moment, the expected earth-shattering explosion did not appear. They only saw 2 faint ripples flash on the surface of the water lily protector's body, and then the 2 real chi pill firebombs disappeared. They did not even make the slightest noise, becoming 2 complete duds. Lin Yi was stunned for a moment. This was the first time someone had used this method to neutralize the real chi pill firebombs. It was the same way as the 5 elements murderous chi attack. This water lily protector was really unbeatable. Now you know the gap between you and me? The water lily protector smiled mysteriously. Lin Yi was silent for a moment, then suddenly said, "This is the old well of tranquility?" I didn't expect a human like you to not only be smart, but also so knowledgeable. You actually know about my old well of tranquility? The water lily protector could not help but be a little surprised. It's nothing. When you were fighting with the brain-eating worm at the banquet, I just happened to hear the brain-eating worm mention this word, Lin Yi said lightly. I see. Since you have seen my strength, what are you going to do next? The water lily protector had a playful look on his face. Well, Your Excellency's strength is extraordinary. Not only do you have an almost unsolvable illusory space, but you also have a helpless defense like the old well of tranquility. With these 2 divine skills, Your Excellency can dominate an area. Lin Yi said truthfully. That's right. Before the Lord came here, I was the #1 overlord of this place. Only that of the talented of the insect could slightly compete with me. Even if all of the other big and small spirit beasts were added together, I could kill them as I pleased. The water lily protector said proudly. Since Your Excellency is so powerful, why are you willing to submit to that lord's subordinates? You are nominally a protector, but in fact, you are just a lackey. Linist. The water lily protector suddenly fell silent. After a long time, she came back to her senses and said mockingly, Human, don't waste your time. Whether you want to find out about that lord from me or sow discord between me and that lord, it's all in vain. I'm not an idiot who only has muscles and no brains. I won't be fooled so easily. All right. Lin Yi was a little disappointed. This primordial trial ground was full of danger. Compared to the water lily protector and the brain-eating insect, the primordial Gomong King and the others were considered easy to deal with. However, the biggest threat still came from that omnipresent lord. An existence that could control the water lily protector and the brain-eating insect was definitely not to be underestimated. If he could not find a way to figure out that lord's background, even if he could successfully escape this time, he would still be on tenterhooks in the future. Enough with the nonsense. I'll now give you one last chance to back out. Human, think carefully before you answer me. Are you going to accept my offer and become my assistant, or choose to die here? The water lily protector said solemnly. I've thought it through very clearly. I won't be your assistant, nor will I die here. I have a third option. Lin Yi smiled faintly. A third option? Interesting. I'd like to hear where you got the third option. The water lily protector's eyes narrowed into slits. Lin Yi thought carefully and suddenly smiled apologetically. I'm sorry, I miscalculated. To be precise, there should be a third and fourth option. A third and a fourth. The water lily protector was stunned for a moment and said disdainfully, All right, then explain to me what the third and fourth options are. As the saying goes, it's impolite not to reciprocate. Since Your Excellency thinks so highly of me and has given me 2 options, then I have to give Your Excellency 2 options in return. One is for me to kill you, and the other is for me to subdue you. What do you think, Your Excellency? Lin Yi smiled and said tit for tat. Kill me? Subdue me? Ha! The water lily protector did not get angry. Instead, she laughed so hard that she could not control herself. After a long time, she barely stopped laughing and said playfully, "Interesting, very interesting. Humans are indeed very interesting creatures. You are a typical example." "Is that interesting?" Lin Yi squinted at her and smiled faintly. "Of course it's interesting. If you met an ant and told you that it wanted to kill you and subdue you, wouldn't you find it interesting?" The water lily protector laughed. Lin Yi's performance just now was indeed impressive, but it was at most a little smarter than ordinary people. It could not change his weak ant nature. From the beginning to the end, the water lily protector did not treat him as a real opponent. He was just a fun toy. "Haven't you heard of this saying, sir?" Lin Yi smiled. "What is it?" The water lily protector asked curiously. "You can't judge a book by its cover." Lin Yi said lightly. "You can't judge a book by its cover. It's a good thing to be ambitious, but unfortunately, no matter how ambitious you are, you can't change the lowly nature of an ant. You should know very well that I am the master of this place. It is easy for me to kill you, but—" The water lily protector paused and said with a disdainful look, "Don't say that I'm bullying you. I'll give you a chance to see how you kill me and subdue me." Duanmu looked at Lin Yi nervously. From her point of view, the water lily protector was almost invincible. Even if it did not attack and just stood there and let you attack it, there was nothing you could do to it. Not to mention anything else, just its calmness alone was enough to make people shrink back. Chapter 5266. Duanmu really couldn't think of how to deal with such an unbeatable opponent. However, Lin Yi seemed to have a card up his sleeve. The water lotus protector was looking down on him, but his attitude at the moment was as if he was going to defeat the other party. Such an expression really puzzled the water lotus protector. Where did this human's confidence come from? Before that, I want to say something else. The water lotus is one of many plants, so what's the difference between you and those elixirs? Lin Yi suddenly asked. Hearing this, the water lotus protector was confused at first, but then he laughed out loud. That's right, if I didn't have the opportunity to cultivate to this stage, I can only be considered a spirit medicine. Otherwise, why would I spend so much effort to create a 100-herb garden? Those are all of my race. If the opportunity is good enough, maybe the next me will appear among them. Oh, then I'm relieved. Lin Yi smiled faintly. Relieved? Relieved about what? Not only the water lotus protector, but even Duanmu also had a puzzled look on her face. What was Lin Yi up to? In the end, Lin Yi waved his hand, and then nothing happened. Pretending to be mysterious. The water lotus protector sneered. Duanmu looked at Lin Yi and didn't know what to say. Since Lin Yi was so confident, she thought that he would have to use his trump card. At the very least, the power would be much stronger than the real chi pill firebomb just now. Otherwise, how could he deal with the water lotus protector? She never thought that Lin Yi would be so calm and collected from the beginning to the end, but there was no movement at all. How could this be tolerated? Lin Yi didn't feel embarrassed at all. Instead, he said indifferently, "Do you really think I didn't do anything?" It was only then that Duanmu suddenly reacted and subconsciously exclaimed, "How did I become a primordial spirit?" Although the moon's reflection was an illusion, it trapped their true bodies. There was no such thing as extracting their primordial spirits. Duanmu was still fine until just now, but in the blink of an eye, he had become a primordial spirit. Sorry, in order to make it easier for you to watch the show, I took the initiative to drag you in. Don't worry, it'll be fine. Lin Yi turned his head and explained apologetically. Oh, nothing. Duanmu still didn't quite understand what was going on, but since it was Lin Yi who did it, she had nothing to worry about. Unknowingly, Lin Yi had established a rather reliable impression in her mind. It was really rare to see someone who could make her trust him so subconsciously. At the same time, the water lotus protector on the other side was completely stunned and couldn't say a word for a long time. Duanmu did not know what was going on, but it had clearly sensed the source of the problem. Of course, it was different from Duanmu. Duanmu was now a primordial spirit, while it was still in its main body. What did you do? Why can't I sense the other mirror worlds? The water lotus protector finally revealed a look of shock. This was the first time it had lost its confidence in controlling everything. Although what Lin Yi had done had surprised it, it couldn't change anything. It was just like how Sun Wukong could never escape the palm of the Buddha no matter how hard he tried. But this time, it was different. The Buddha felt that it couldn't protect it anymore. The mirror world was still the same mirror world, and it didn't feel like it had changed at all. However, the problem was that this mirror world had been isolated into another space, and the cause of this, could do nothing about it. Isn't that simple? It's because I've broken your mirror image. Lin Yi smiled mysteriously. Impossible. Absolutely impossible. The water lotus protector refused to believe it. There was only a difference of one word between breaking, and the meaning was very similar. However, it was a completely different concept. Deciphering mirrored flowers, reflected moon meant that one only needed to find the principles and flaws of reflected moon's mirrored flowers, reflected moon's movement. It was very difficult, but it was not completely impossible. As long as one's insight was strong enough, it was possible. Not to mention that it was absolutely impossible. There was once an existence who had done this, but that was the only one so far. It was the Lord who was above the water lotus protector, the brain-eating bug, and all the other big and small spirit beasts. Apart from the Lord, it couldn't imagine anyone else who could do this. Even the intelligent human in front of it couldn't do it. After all, the difference in strength between them was too great. This was not something that could be done through trickery. However, if it wasn't for breaking it, how could all this be explained now? It doesn't matter if you don't believe me, but as the host, I still have to say hello. Welcome to my world. Lin Yi bowed politely. Your world? The water lotus protector and Duan Muyu spoke almost in unison this time. What was going on? This was clearly the mirror world just now. How did it inexplicably become his world? However, they quickly understood, because the mirror world was instantly dismembered and shattered, collapsing with a loud bang. What did you say just now? In your mirror world, you're the unique master. I'm sorry to borrow it, but now it's my world and I'm the only master here. Lin Yi said with a chuckle. His words were very pretentious, even more so than the water lotus protector just now. However, with this shocking scene as a foil, neither Duan Muyu nor the water lotus protector felt that he was pretentious at all. Instead, they felt that he was speaking the truth. In particular, the water lotus protector was far more shocked than Duan Muyu at this moment. One must know that even if the moon's mirror image was broken, the remaining mirror world was still real. Moreover, because his main body was residing in it, this was the one with the strongest control over all the mirror worlds. In the end, this most secure mirror world collapsed in an instant right under his nose. He didn't even have the slightest ability to resist. This kind of shock and horror was simply unparalleled. The water lotus protector was no longer calm. At this moment, the way he looked at Lin Yi was no longer condescending and contemptuous. Instead, it was filled with unprecedented fear. I am me, Lin Yi replied. And then? The water lotus protector continued to ask. Lin Yi tilted his head and thought for a moment. Suddenly he said, Are they fireworks of different colors? Chapter 5267. Could it be that you've already mastered the laws of the world? A thought flashed through the water lily's mind. Lin Yi had just destroyed its mirror world. Now that it thought about it, it was clear that he had used another physical world to directly crush its illusory mirror world. Apart from this unverifiable legend, it could not think of any other possibility for someone to be able to do this. What are the laws of the world? Lin Yi was stunned by the water lily's question. Aren't they? The water lily was stunned as well. Duan Muyu, who was at the side, was confused. What were these two talking about? You can tell me. Maybe it is. Lin Yi was rather interested in this term that he had never heard of before. I must have been mistaken. It's just an illusory legend. There are no laws of the world at all. You must have used some evil method that cannot see the light of day. That must be it. The water lily hurriedly corrected itself. You're even trying to provoke me. Since you want to know so much, I'll be merciful and tell you. Lin Yi smiled faintly and said, This space is the world that I control. I don't know what the laws of the world are, but in this space I can divide it into as many pieces as I want. It was just a thought of mine to dismember your mirror world. This was not a lie. To put it bluntly, Lin Yi had actually kept it in the space of his jade pendant. Although he was its master in name, Lin Yi actually only had the simplest method to control the space of the jade pendant, which was to divide the space. However, it was this simple and brainless method that could produce fatal power at this time. Crushing the water lily's mirror world was just a piece of cake. If Lin Yi really wanted to try, it would probably be easy for him to dismember the water lily itself. How did you get me in here? The water lily was still skeptical. It still hoped that this was Lin Yi's bluff. If that was the case, it would still have a chance to turn the tables. Otherwise, if it was really as Lin Yi said, it would really be at his mercy. Oh, didn't you say it yourself? You're just an elixir. This place of mine may not be very convenient for other things, but it is very accurate for collecting spiritual herbs. To put it bluntly, it is the absolute nemesis of existences like you. Seeing that you did not directly kill me just now, I advise you to quickly accept your fate. That way, you will be able to suffer less physical pain. Lin Yi chuckled. This was where Lin Yi's confidence came from. No matter how invincible the water lily was, as long as it was a plant, it was destined to be easily taken into the space of the jade pendant. Once it entered the space of the jade pendant, it would be Lin Yi's territory, so there was nothing to be afraid of. The water lily also knew that the situation was not good, but it would not be so easily frightened. Even if the moonlight reflection, which it was most proud of, had been completely broken, it still had the rippleless ancient well. No matter where and when it would be invincible. Most importantly, its strength was at least 10 levels higher than that of Lin. What was there for it to be afraid of? Human, you're too naive. You want me to accept my fate just like that? Why should I? The water lily sneered. Taking advantage of the moment when Lin Yi was distracted, it did not hesitate to launch a sneak attack. Four doppelgangers attacked Lin Yi at the same time. Although the strength of these doppelgangers was not enough to deal with a powerful existence like the brain-eating insect, it was enough to deal with Lin Yi. Seeing this scene, Duan Muyu's heart suddenly jumped to her throat. Things had developed to this point, and she thought that she could breathe a sigh of relief. She did not expect the water lily to launch a sneak attack without any grace. It seemed that she was really desperate. In the end, in the face of all this, Lin Yi did not move at all. He did not even blink. The opponent's 4 doppelgangers could not get close to him at all. With just a thought, they were isolated in a separate space. No matter how they struggled, it was futile. Again in this space, Lin Yi was the only master. The water lily was instantly dumbfounded, but it still did not believe it. This time, its entire body turned into a human form, and it pounced on Lin Yi like a madman. Unfortunately, the result was the same as its 4 doppelgangers. No matter how hard it struggled, it could not break out of the isolated space that Lin Yi had drawn out for it. Idiot, weren't you very arrogant just now? Seeing this, Lin Yi thought playfully. Up until now, the opponent had been playing with him and Duan Muyu in the palm of its hand. Now, it was time to change positions. How could this be? The water lily used all of its means, but it still could not move. This time, even if it did not give up, there was nothing it could do. The key was that it had finally confirmed one thing. This was actually a real physical space. Just thinking about the meaning behind it made one shudder. Its background was even more terrifying than that of the Lord. Who was this human? Looking at this guy who was panting, Lin Yi smiled without saying a word. He thought to himself that it was fortunate that he had such a jade pendant space, which was just enough to eat the opponent to death. Otherwise, he really would not be able to do anything to this guy, and he would really be in trouble today. On the other hand, Duan Muyu, who was at the side, did not understand what was going on. The image of Lin Yi in her mind had become extremely unfathomable. He had all kinds of magical methods, and it was really hard to fathom. You shameless adulterers. Don't go too far. The water lily pointed at Lin Yi and Duan Muyu in exasperation. Go too far? Isn't that a bit too much? Since you treated us like this just now, I'll do the same to you now. It's just locking you up. I haven't even sliced you up to study you yet. You're still far from going too far. Take your time. Lin Yi said calmly. Slicing me up to study me? The water lily was so shocked that its eyelids twitched. If it was before, it would not have taken such shameless and stupid words seriously. But now it could not. In its eyes, Lin Yi was a legendary existence who could control space. If he really wanted to slice it up, it would probably only take a thought. That's right. From the perspective of elixirs, you're a rare treasure in this world. You can probably sell for a sky-high price after you're sliced, Lin Yi threatened with a smile. Chapter 5268. Plead with me? Duan Muyu pointed at herself in surprise and spread out her hands in amusement. Are you sure you didn't find the wrong person? I didn't create this space. It's not up to me to say what he wants to do. What's the use of pleading with me? It's useful. It's definitely useful. You're his woman. In order to save you, he didn't hesitate to risk his life. It can be seen that you hold a very important position in his heart. Your words will definitely work. Madam, please save me. The water lotus protector begged for mercy. What nonsense are you talking about? Duan Muyu frowned. She knew very well that Lin Yi had stayed behind to deal with the water lotus protector, not for her. Even if he had the intention to save her, it would only be a supplementary reason, and definitely not the main purpose. At this time, Lin Yi suddenly smiled and said, Since you've said so, then I might as well tell you something. Do you know what happened to those guys who fought with me for a woman? How was it? The water lotus protector asked weakly. There are countless of them. Some lost their lives, some lost their family jewels, and some twisted their worldview to become neither human nor ghost. Which one do you think you are? Anyway, I'm a good person. Heroes have a weakness for beauties. Usually, I'm very easy to talk to, but once someone fights with me for a woman, I can't do it. To be honest, when I go crazy, even I'm afraid of myself. Lin Yi said casually with a serious expression. The water lotus protector didn't know whether he was talking nonsense or telling the truth. Her eyes wandered back and forth between Lin Yi and Duan Muyu. At this time, she was so regretful that even her roots were turning green. Of all the things she could have done, she had to find Duan Muyu on a whim. This time, not only did she not succeed in the dual cultivation, she was about to die. Human. Oh no, Senior, I really didn't know that she was your woman at first. Don't you have a saying that the ignorant are innocent? Since I didn't kill you before, and I didn't really dual cultivate with her, please spare me this time. The water lotus protector bowed and begged for mercy. Don't spout nonsense. Duan Muyu suddenly blushed. She didn't know if it was because she was shy when she heard the word dual cultivation, or because she was called Lin Yi's woman. With her usual style, this kind of girlish expression could be regarded as unprecedented. But the water lily wanted to argue, but Lin Yi didn't give it the chance. Of course, he didn't get rid of it either. Instead, he isolated it and locked it up. Then he took Duan Muyu's soul and left the space in the jade pendant. The moonlight in the mirror had been broken, and the water lily protector was also locked up. After the two of them came out, they naturally returned to the real world, and Duan Muyu's primordial spirit naturally returned to his main body. The big tent was still the same big tent, and the scene in front of him was still the same. However, after wandering in so many mirror worlds for so long, even Duan Muyu could clearly feel the difference. Even if every place was exactly the same, the real world obviously gave people a more realistic feeling. No matter how realistic the mirror world was, it was still an illusion, and could never create this unique feeling of reality. However, Duan Muyu was still a little worried. He was afraid that this was another mirror world that was more realistic. When he walked out of the big tent and saw the big and small spirit beasts outside, he finally relaxed. After all, the mirror world did not have these guys. He couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. I'm finally back. It's illusory and real at the same time. It feels like a nightmare. Nightmares will always wake up one day. Lin Yi laughed. Duan Muyu glanced at him and said gratefully, but if it wasn't for you, this nightmare might never wake up. This time, I really want to thank you. Don't mention it. We both took what we needed. Lin Yi shook his head. He did not deal with the water lily entirely for Duan Muyu. He was just afraid that this guy would find cold in the others and lead the brain-eating insect to them. Still, I have to thank you, Duan Muyu said seriously. No matter what Lin Yi's motive was, it was a fact that he had saved her. Duan Muyu was never an ungrateful person, and she had to remember this favor. While the two were talking, a patrol bee flew over and looked up and down at Lin. Who are you? Why are you with my madam? Well, in the words of your master, your madam and I are adulterers. Lin Yi said mischievously. Duan Muyu could not help but blush when she heard this. She glared at Lin Yi reproachfully, but in her heart, she was smiling. Previously, she only thought that Lin Yi was unfathomable, but she did not expect him to have a joking temper. Adulterer? The patrol bee took a long time to understand the meaning of these words. It immediately attracted all the other patrol bees around them. They surrounded Lin Yi and Duan Muyu and said aggressively, "How dare you? How dare you make my master a cuckold? Everyone, let's tear this adulterer into pieces. As for the madam, master will deal with her personally." The group of patrol bees was about to attack, but Lin Yi smiled faintly. "Wait, aren't you going to ask what happened to your master?" As soon as these words came out, the group of patrol bees was stunned and looked at each other. Yes, shouldn't master stay in the big tent and cultivate with the madam? Why didn't master do anything when this pair of adulterers escaped from inside? With the usual cruel style of the water lily, they did not think that their master would be so lenient to the point of being indifferent to being cuckolded, unless, thinking of this, the group of patrol bees were all shocked, but then they immediately threw this absurd idea out of their minds. Master was the guardian of that lord, a powerful existence that was second only to one and above tens of thousands of people. How could he fail miserably because of a mere human? But if that was not the case, how could there be no reaction at all? At this time, a weak voice suddenly sounded from behind. "Not good. Master must have been killed by them. This human is very scary, he almost killed me with a single look just now." All the patrol bees turned around and saw that the one who spoke was Kappa. To them, Kappa was one of their own, so they didn't doubt him at all. Kappa's strength wasn't much weaker than them, but this human almost killed Kappa with just a glance. This was something that even their master couldn't do. Chapter 5269. Lin Yi looked at Kappa playfully. It seemed that this guy had been holding a grudge against Protector Water Lotus for a long time. It was obvious that he wanted to see the world in chaos by saying such words. However, it was not surprising. The Kappa clan had been destroyed by Protector Water Lotus, and the Holy Water Bead, the clan's most precious treasure, had been taken away. It would be strange if Kappa did not bear a grudge against him. Master is dead. Everyone run. Kappa was the first to take the lead to escape. The rest of the patrol bees were also frightened when they saw this. After looking at each other, they turned around and fled without hesitation, no longer caring about anything else. Their hatred for their master, Protector Water Lotus, was not far from the hatred of the extermination of Kappa's clan. Just because of a casual word from Protector Water Lotus, they would kill each other. They only feared such a master, and would never have the slightest bit of loyalty. Just a little instigation would naturally cause a disaster to befall them and they would flee. With Kappa and the patrol bees as an example, the other slave-like spirit beasts also fled with a loud bang. In the blink of an eye, only Lin Yi and Duan Muyu were left looking at each other speechlessly. However, this was also good. It saved them a lot of trouble. Although with Lin Yi's strength he would not care about these spirit beasts, they were still a small problem. This time, it was solved by Kappa with a few words, so he had to give it a thumbs up. After a moment of silence, Duan Muyu suddenly asked, "What happened just now?" "You mean that Kappa? It was talking nonsense. I can kill it with one look. I'm not a god." Lin Yi laughed. "That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about what's going on with that strange space earlier. Why was my primordial spirit brought in and even that guy was completely suppressed?" Duan Muyu asked. This question had been in her heart for a long time, but she could not ask it in front of Protector Water Lotus. Now that there was no one around, she really could not hold it in anymore. About that? Lin Yi couldn't help but hesitate. Just now, he was afraid that leaving Duanmuyu alone would cause problems, so he took the opportunity to bring her soul into the space of the jade pendant. But this was one of his core secrets, and he absolutely could not reveal it to outsiders. After today's incident, although Duanmuyu could be regarded as a life-and-death friend of his, it was not to the extent that he could absolutely trust his own people. He didn't dare to reveal this to the other party. Seeing his hesitation, Duanmuyu knew that this matter could not be easily disclosed to her. However, she had always been a person who would get to the bottom of things and never let sand in her eyes. If this matter was not cleared up, she was afraid that she would worry about it for the rest of her life. It might even become a knot in his heart that would negatively affect his future cultivation. Didn't you say I'm your woman? Don't tell me you can't even tell your woman about this? Duanmuyu suddenly blushed. Lin Yi suddenly choked, and couldn't help but look up and down at Duanmuyu strangely. He saw that although the other party's face was slightly red, her expression was quite calm, as if she had already gotten over it. Being stared at by Lin Yi at such a close distance, although Duanmuyu was a heroine, her heart couldn't help but pound, and a strange thought suddenly flashed through her mind. Could this be the legendary feeling of being hit by a deer? What's wrong? Did I say something wrong? Duanmuyu stared back at Lin Yi, unwilling to be outdone. I'm sorry about that. I just said that to annoy that guy. Don't take it to heart. Lin Yi couldn't help but scratch his head awkwardly. At that time, when he said this, he didn't think it through and said it casually. Now that he thought about it, it was too abrupt. This was also because Duanmuyu was more open-minded, otherwise, it would be very awkward for other women. So I've misunderstood? Duanmuyu looked at him deeply, and said with a somewhat complicated expression, All right, since that's the case, how about we make a deal? A deal? What kind of deal? Lin Yi was stunned. Didn't you want to know about rejuvenation of withered leaf? I can explain the essence of this move to you. In return, you have to tell me what's going on in that space just now. How about that? Duanmuyu suggested. Isn't rejuvenation of withered leaf a secret move of your Yiling sect? Lin Yi was surprised. According to the ancestral teachings, rejuvenation of withered leaf can't be taught to outsiders. However, our Yiling sect has always been clear about gratitude and grudges. Since you saved me, I can make an exception this time, Duanmuyu said. If one were to think about it carefully, her words might not hold water. Even if she wanted to repay Lin Yi for saving her life, she didn't have to tell him the essence of rejuvenation of withered leaf. She could have used other methods. However, she was the eldest senior sister of the Yiling sect. According to the Yiling sect's rules, as long as one's strength increased by one level, they would be the next sect leader. Even if she did that, the higher-ups of the sect wouldn't do anything to her. What if I'm a blabbermouth and spread the essence of rejuvenation of withered leaf? Lin asked. Rejuvenation of withered leaf was a trump card for the entire Yiling sect. Probably only the most core disciples in the sect had the opportunity to cultivate it. If word got out and people studied it and targeted it, the consequences would be unimaginable. Duanmuyu looked at him deeply and said with certainty, You won't. All right, since you trust me so much, then I'll do as you say. Lin smiled. Aren't you afraid that I'll spread your secret? Duanmuyu asked. You won't. Lin Yi returned her words. Although they weren't very familiar with each other, a person's nature could be seen in a life-and-death situation. Just like how Duanmuyu trusted him, he also believed that Duanmuyu wasn't a despicable person. Otherwise, he wouldn't have brought Duanmuyu's primordial spirit in without hesitation. Actually, from that moment onwards, he had already revealed his secret to Duanmuyu without holding anything back. Duanmuyu blushed slightly when she heard that. As the eldest senior sister of the Yiling sect, the number of times she blushed today was more than the number of times she had blushed in the past 10 years combined. Even she found it a little strange. She kept blushing for no reason. Was she having a fever? But I'll say this first. I can only tell you the essence of rejuvenation of withered leaf, but I won't tell you the method to cultivate it. Is that all right? Duanmuyu tossed aside the random thoughts in her mind and returned to the topic at hand. Although it was very troublesome for the essence to be leaked, if there was no method to cultivate it, Then at least it could ensure that others wouldn't be able to cultivate rejuvenation of withered leaf for a short period of time. That way, the sex trump card wouldn't have to be used on their own people. Chapter 5270. Alright, the essence of rejuvenation of withered leaves is only one thing, and that is to open the hidden door of life, Duan Muyu said slowly. The hidden door of life? Lin Yi was slightly stunned. Do you know that all the mental cultivation methods and moves of our leaf spirit sect come from the same source? They all originate from the most ordinary yet most extraordinary thing in the world. Duan Muyu enlightened him. Leaf? Lin Yi's eyes lit up. This was not difficult to guess. The name of the leaf spirit sect explained everything. Moreover, all its representative moves had the word leaf in them, such as the falling leaves signifying autumn, a leaf like a mountain, and the rejuvenation of withered leaves. That's right, it's a leaf. The birth of a leaf and the fall of a leaf represent the reincarnation of the world. When people see a green leaf, they will see vitality, and when they see a withered leaf, they will see death. However, they don't know that the two reinforce and counteract each other. A green leaf can also have a killing intent, and a withered leaf can also have a day of rejuvenation. At this point, Duan Muyu paused, took out a withered yellow leaf from his arms, and handed it to Lin. Feel it. Lin Yi took the withered leaf and looked at it for a while. It was different from what he had expected. There was nothing unusual on it, nor was there any hidden spiritual energy. This was just an ordinary withered leaf. However, after thinking about Duan Muyu's words for a while, Lin Yi suddenly had a flash of inspiration. Do you mean that there is vitality on this withered leaf that ordinary people can't see? When Duan Muyu heard this, a surprised expression immediately appeared on his face. This guy's comprehension ability was a little too abnormal. When he first obtained the withered leaf, it took him an entire day to understand this principle. Compared to other disciples of the same sect, this was considered fast. Some people could spend an entire month trying to understand it but still couldn't understand it. They didn't even have the qualifications to practice withered leaf rejuvenation. Of course, after witnessing the entire process of Lin Yi cracking the mirror world just now, Duan Muyu was not too surprised by this. Comprehension was closely related to insight. For a person like Lin Yi who had extremely abnormal insight, his comprehension would naturally not be weak. That's right. Although the leaf has withered, it's not really dead. There's still a strong vitality hidden in it. It's just that it's temporarily sealed because of the environment. As long as we can open this sealed door of vitality, it will be able to regain its vitality, which is the withered leaf that you saw earlier, Duan Muyu explained. Lin Yi nodded. These words were not difficult to understand. Lin Yi was saying that when a person was exhausted, it seemed that he had reached his limit, but in fact, it was just an instinctive self-defense mechanism of the human body. He was not really at the point of exhaustion. Then how do we open this sealed door of life? Linist. This was the crux of the problem. Duan Muyu was silent for a moment and said, you only need to do two things. One is to hypnotize yourself, and the other is to use your true qi to pierce the acupoints. Strictly speaking, her words had already pointed out the cultivation method. She could not say anything more. Otherwise, it would be tantamount to personally teaching Lin Yi to practice the withered leaf rejuvenation. Even if she was the eldest senior sister of Yi Ling's sect, she did not have this right. However, Lin Yi did not need her to say more at all. With Lin Yi's comprehension, these two sentences were enough. As for what to do next, he could completely rely on himself to figure it out, and there was no need to put Duan Muyu in a difficult position. Thank you. Lin Yi cupped his hands and thanked her. He asked this purely for reference research because he had not tried it before. At the moment, he did not know how much value he could dig out from it. However, one thing was certain. What she said was indeed profound and worth pondering. Now can you tell me about you? Duan Muyu said with great anticipation. Well, as you saw just now, I have a private space. As long as I think about it, I can easily put things in the real world, but only plants and some ordinary items. As for humans, I can't. Of course, the primordial spirit can go in. Lin Yi explained. As for how this space came about, he could not elaborate. After all, on the one hand, it was related to his life experience, and on the other hand, he only heard it from Lin Dongfang. He did not know much about it. Private space. Even though Duan Mu had seen it with her own eyes, she was still stunned when she heard this word at this time. This kind of thing had never been heard of or seen before. Perhaps even the old monsters in the Yuanying realm in the remote ancient Jianghu did not have such an artifact. He could not help but be surprised and confused. Who the hell are you? Lin could not help but roll his eyes. The water lotus protector had such a reaction, and Duan Mu also had such a reaction. He had to be patient and said, I'm not a saint. I'm just a lump of primordial spirit. Are you really just a primordial senior of the Blue Cloud sect in the North Island? Duan Mu did not believe it and questioned, but why are your moves completely different from those of the Blue Cloud sect in the North Island? They're not the same at all. From the remote ancient Jianghu to the present, the time span was too long. Even if it was passed down from the same sect, there would inevitably be a lot of changes in the mental cultivation methods and moves, but it would not be completely different. It was almost equivalent to setting up a new sect. The 3 sects of the North Island were recognized as the sects with the most historical inheritance in the remote ancient Jianghu. In the records, there had never been a major disaster such as the extermination of the whole sect, so it was impossible for there to be such a big deviation in the inheritance of the most basic mental cultivation methods and moves. There could only be 2 explanations. One was that Lin Yi had learned too many things and formed his own sect. The other was that Lin Yi was not the primordial senior of the Blue Cloud sect in the North Island at all. Yi Ling's sect paid the most attention to the instinctive perception in the subconscious. As the eldest senior sister of Yi Ling's sect, Duan Mu was naturally second to none in this aspect. A woman's intuition was very accurate, and her intuition was far above most women's. Her intuition told her that Lin Yi should belong to the latter, because Lin Yi did not look like an ancient primordial senior at all. He should be a real young man, and his real age was very likely to be much younger than her. Oh, I've never been one. Lin Yi said honestly. Then why do they all call you Martial Granduncle? Duan Mu said in surprise. If it was those ordinary disciples of the Blue Cloud sect in the North Island who admitted it, they were relatively easy to be deceived. But Xianxia was a master in the gold core stage. How could Lin Yi deceive him? It's a long story. Although I'm not their real Martial Granduncle, we do have this connection. It's not wrong for them to call me Martial Granduncle. Lin Yi smiled. Since they had come to this point, he might as well make it clear. He said, You know Heaven Stage Island, right? Chapter 5271. Well, I can tell you that the Heaven Stage Island really exists, because I came back from the Heaven Stage Island. Lin Yi said frankly. There was no need to hide this kind of thing, because even if he didn't say it himself, someone could find out the whole story from other cultivators in the secular world. There was no way to hide it at all. Is that true? Duan Mu was completely stunned. The impact of Lin Yi's words was even greater than the space of the jade pendant, because it almost subverted the worldview that she had cultivated since she was a child. The Heaven Stage Island that only appeared in the legends actually existed. After she digested it for a while, Lin Yi continued, I went to the Heaven Stage Island from the secular world and joined the sect Blue Cloud Pavilion of the North Island. It should be the same sect as the Blue Cloud sect of the North Island of the small archaic Jianghu of the far ancient Jianghu, and its inheritance is more complete and more powerful. Therefore, to Xianxia and the others, I'm naturally called Granduncle Master. Granduncle Xen doesn't know about this? Duan Mu asked. Maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. Lin Yi said non-committally. Xianxia definitely didn't know at the beginning, but after so many months, if he wanted to inquire about Lin Yi, it should not be difficult for him to find out about Lin Yi's situation. He just didn't know why he didn't say it. Of course, whether for Xianxia or the Blue Cloud sect of the North Island, it didn't matter whether Lin Yi was the real archaic Granduncle Master or not. What mattered was that he knew the complete advanced version of the mental cultivation method of their sect, which alone made him worthy of being called Granduncle Master. Well, it's really an eye-opener today. Duan Mu let out a long breath. She was a little confused now. These things couldn't be digested without a few days, especially the Heaven Stage Island. She could only accept it slowly. By the way, what are you going to do next? Lin Yi asked. Of course I'm going to the river of divine senses, Duan Muyu said. Before this, she still wanted to wander around looking for treasures of heaven and earth, but now she had completely given up on this idea. Water Lily Protector alone could easily control her life and death. Now there was a large number of powerful spirit beasts including the brain-eating bug, and even an even more terrifying and mysterious lord outside. Wandering around alone was tantamount to courting death. Therefore, her only thought now was to find the river of divine senses to refine her divine senses and then quickly leave this troublesome place. After a pause, Duan Muyu asked, "What about you?" After a pause, Duan Muyu asked, "What about you?" But this place is so big, it's easier said than done to find them. Why don't we go to the river of spiritual knowledge together? I think Cold and the others must also be heading in the direction of the river of spiritual knowledge. In theory, yes, but I have a simpler method. Before Duan Muyu could ask, Qin Fan said. Lin Yi grinned meaningfully, then his figure flashed and disappeared. After a while, he reappeared, but there was a familiar figure beside him. It was Water Lily Protector. Duan Muyu jumped in fright. There was no doubt that the Water Lily was powerful, and it was only because of Lin Yi's jade space that he was able to suppress it so tightly. Now that it had escaped, wouldn't it be releasing a tiger back into the mountains? But to her surprise, the Water Lily didn't do anything after coming out, and just stood there obediently. It just stood there obediently with a bitter look on its face. Lin Yi smiled. Don't worry, this is just a clone. Its main body is still trapped by me. If it dares to do anything, its main body will immediately die. It won't dare to do anything. Duan Muyu carefully looked at Water Lily Protector and saw that it was really scared like a quail. She shook her head speechlessly. Water Lily Protector was a powerful existence, but now it had been turned into such a state by Lin. It was more than just a mess, it was a little pitiful. Why did you get it out? Duan Muyu asked. Isn't it known to be able to control every blade of grass and every tree on the ground? Since the brain-eating bug can get it to help, I can naturally do it too. I asked it to find Lung Lung and the others. If it can't find them, I'll kill it. Lin Yi said and pouted at Water Lily Protector, urging, What are you waiting for? Hurry up. Sit. Water Lily Protector nodded quickly. It had no choice but to lower its head. Its life was now completely in the hands of Lin Yi, so it had no choice but to obey him. Duan Muyu couldn't help but feel amused and speechless. It was really unlucky for the Water Lily Protector to meet such a big nemesis like Lin Yi. After a while, Water Lily Protector said cautiously, I found them, they are approaching the river of divine knowledge, but soon they will encounter a spirit beast comparable to the early stage of Gold Core. They should encounter a lot of trouble. The early stage of Gold Core? Lin Yi frowned. With the strength of Lung Lung and the others, although it was not completely impossible to deal with a spirit beast of this level, it was indeed a big challenge. He immediately said, Take us there. The implication was that Duan Muyu was also included, and Duan Muyu had no intention of objecting. Anyway, they were all heading in the direction of the river of divine knowledge. She was also happy to go with Lin Yi, so she could be his companion. The two immediately returned to the outside world through the tree-hole's sky ladder. All they saw was the familiar primeval forest. However, as soon as Lin Yi's figure appeared at the entrance of the tree-hole, a surprised voice immediately came from the side, Senior. Senior Lin. Lin Yi heard the voice and looked over. The voice was none other than Fei Yangxing, who had been released earlier. He couldn't help but be a little surprised. Why are you still here? I don't dare to go around, so I just stayed here and waited for you to come out. Fei Yangxing rubbed his hands and smiled apologetically. This was the truth. It was not that he didn't want to go, but he really didn't dare to go around. With his strength, he didn't need to be like Water Lily Protector at all. Any spirit beast in the late stage of Foundation establishment would kill him. It was safer to hold on to Lin. Oh, aren't you afraid that I can't defeat those spirit beasts? Lin Yi was amused. Fei Yangxing was taking a risk by doing this. If he didn't wait for him but other spirit beasts, wouldn't he become a tribute? No. Senior, you are so powerful. I believe you will definitely be fine. Fei Yangsheng hurriedly flattered. In fact, he simply felt that Lin Yi was a spirit that came and went without a trace. Even if he couldn't defeat the other party, it would definitely be no problem for him to stay alive. Besides, he was quite confident in his hiding method, so he dared to stay. Chapter 5272. Although you're not a very good person, you made the right bet. Duanmuyu, who had followed Lin Yi out, could not help but smile when he heard this. Senior sister Duanmu, you're safe and sound too. That's great. Fei Yangsheng hurriedly nodded and bowed to greet them, but in the next moment, he saw the water lotus climbing out behind the two of them. His eyes suddenly widened and he screamed, turned around and ran away. However, after running a few steps, he realized that no one was chasing after him. He turned around and saw that Lin Yi and Duanmu were looking at him strangely, while the water lotus was standing behind them obediently. Fei Yangsheng finally reacted. He scratched his head awkwardly and asked with a smile, "This is my new little brother." Lin Yi casually made up a story. Duanmu was amused, while the water lotus dared not say anything. "I'm just trapped by you. When did I become your little brother?" Fei Yangsheng did not know the inside story, and he was immediately in awe. Although he had never seen magical techniques like the moon's reflection and the old well's rippleness, the water lotus was the leader of all the spirit beasts present. To him, it was a powerful existence that he could only look up to. Lin Yi was actually able to subdue such an existence. He was indeed remarkable. Senior is indeed a senior. You're too powerful. Fei Yangsheng hurriedly squeezed out an expression of admiration. He then rubbed himself to the side and said to the water lotus, "Hello, brother spirit beast. My name is Fei Yangsheng. From now on, we'll be on the same path. Please take care of me." The water lotus snorted with extreme disdain. He turned his head away and could not be bothered with this kind of trash. If it was not under the control of someone else, Fei Yangsheng would have been crushed to death by a single finger. Fei Yangsheng was rebuffed, but he did not feel embarrassed. He turned his head and continued to flatter Lin. After all, Lin Yi was the one with the thick thighs. As long as he pleased Lin Yi, everything else could be discussed. They surrounded Lin Yi and followed him around, trying their best to flatter him. Even Duanmu could not stand it anymore. He frowned and said, "Aren't you annoying?" Fei Yangsheng could only smile bitterly. He didn't want to do this, but what if Lin Yi thought he was a burden and dumped him if he didn't suck up to Lin Yi? How was he supposed to survive in a forest like this where danger lurked everywhere? "Alright, don't waste your energy. I don't like that kind of thing here. If you want to follow me, then follow me. Just don't cause me any trouble." Lin Yi curled his lips. Although he did not treat Fei Yangsheng as one of his own, and he did not trust Fei Yangsheng as much as Duanmu. After all, the latter could be regarded as a life-and-death friend. He was not so cruel as to leave Fei Yangsheng behind and follow him. At the same time, just as Water Lily said, Cold and the others encountered a big problem. A giant black praying mantis that was as tall as 2 people blocked in front of them. A golden core stage spirit beast. Lung Lung quickly shielded Lingshan and the others behind her. Her heart skipped a beat as she felt the ferocious aura coming from the enemy. They had been on the road for days. On the way, they met another 5 or 6 spirit beasts that blocked the way. Including Lung Lung, everyone wasn't in a good state. Their stamina, chi, and spirit were all used up. Especially Ying Ziyu, who got injured from a Foundation establishment stage spirit beast last time. She hadn't fully recovered yet. But that time wasn't entirely Ziyu's fault. It was a dangerous situation, and they were surrounded by 2 spirit beasts. If it wasn't for her trying her best to buy time for Cold and the others, they might not even be able to make it out alive. One could only say that this place was just too dangerous, and without Lin Yi's protection, every second they stood here was a risk. If they could make it out of here alive, they would all be reborn. It wasn't just Ziyu. Lingshan and the others were all injured as well. Now, they met a giant praying mantis that was as strong as a golden core stage. Even if the other party was only the weakest early gold core stage, it was definitely a fatal matter. What do we do? Everyone looked at Lung Lung in unison. Lung Lung was the strongest among them, and she had shown sufficient courage and responsibility in the past few days. Everyone had great trust in her. Even if they could not say that they would blindly follow her lead, she would definitely not go back on her word at critical moments. Kill! Lung Lung spat out fiercely, and her aura changed. She had the aura of iron and blood now. Her soft body stood in front of the praying mantis without hesitation, not backing down. Kill! 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 Ling Shan and the others roared in unison, their auras merging into one. The defensive formation Lin Yi had taught them was just a show a couple of days ago, but now it looked like it had reached a certain level of mastery. Life and death battles were the most motivating, and the saying wasn't wrong at all. Huff, a bunch of human scum like ants dares to challenge me? Where did you get the guts from? The praying mantis didn't have any expression on its insect face, but the mockery was obvious. It didn't care about Lung Lung at all. It's just a praying mantis, but it's quite arrogant. Chen Tian grinned. You can't say that. It has some ability to be arrogant. After all, it's not easy for a praying mantis to grow this big. Who knows how many dirty things it ate to absorb so much nutrition? Fatty Lai chimed in with a smile. That's right. Such a big praying mantis looks very scary. Judging from its voice, it seems to be a male. In the future, the wedding night will be the time of its death. According to their customs, it will be eaten by the bride. How miserable. That's right. Yu Bing and the others all chimed in. It was hard to not be nervous in front of a strong enemy, and they were using this method to calm themselves down. They didn't want to make any mistakes later. Bullshit. You're talking about normal praying mantises. I'm the king mantis. How can I be eaten by a female praying mantis? The praying mantis was pissed off, and it couldn't care less about the mockery anymore. It waved its two scythe-like front limbs and charged at them. It didn't look fast, but its body was long, and its strides were long. With just 3 steps, it crossed a distance of 10 meters, and it arrived in front of Lung Lung. Its scythe-like front limbs turned into 2 black lightning bolts, and the speed of the attack was so fast that it created a sonic boom. Lung Lung was the first one to be attacked. Chapter 5273. Lung Lung did not dare to be negligent. She did not hold back at all. Before her opponent's scythe-like forelimbs slashed down vertically, she used her most powerful ice prison mirror without hesitation. Her surroundings were suddenly filled with extreme coldness. Her opponent's 2 black sides that were closest to her were instantly covered with a layer of ice crystals. Even his movements were significantly slower. Insects were creatures that were extremely afraid of the cold, and mantises were no exception. Even this black praying mantis, which was comparable to a golden core practitioner, had the weakest resistance to the cold. From a certain perspective, it was countered by Lung Lung's ice shatter physique. This was because of the difference in levels, and once Lung Lung broke through to golden core, it wouldn't be a threat at all. It was a pity that Lung Lung was only at foundation completion, and the ice prison mirror didn't freeze her completely. It only slowed the black praying mantis down by more than 70%. That was more than enough. Lung Lung took the chance to retreat and blend into the formation, using herself as the arrow. Third strategy. Understood. Everyone replied. What Lin Yi gave them was a typical defensive formation, but it wasn't a turtle shell that only defended and didn't attack. There were a few different strategies, and the third strategy was to move around and pin down the enemy. Defending passively would only put them at a disadvantage. Using offense as defense, moving around when the opportunity presented itself was even more invulnerable. With Lung Lung as the arrow, Ling Shan, Wu Chentian, Yu Bing, and the others as the backbone, and Ziyu and the others as backup, this formation was much more powerful than what they had on paper. None of them were burdens, and all of them were important members. This was especially true now that the ice prison mirror's effect was so strong that the black praying mantises, which were brimming with murderous intent, suddenly slowed down. Everyone was like fish in water as they moved around the black praying mantises. Every time they attacked, they would retreat, and every time they attacked, they would leave. They didn't give the black praying mantises any chance to retaliate. Even when the black praying mantis tried to attack, it was blocked by the defense team, unable to hurt them at all. You despicable and shameless human scum. All you know how to do is sneak around. Do Do you dare fight me head-on? The black praying mantis was going crazy from anger, although the power of each of their attacks was far from being strong. However, its carapace was much weaker than usual after being frozen by the ice prison mirror. Every time it was struck, it would leave behind a few shallow wounds. 1 or 2 would be fine, but ants could bite an elephant to death. Even the slightest injury would be fatal if it accumulated for too long. What's more, the damage caused by the crowd could only be considered small, but it wasn't so small that it was negligible. Idiot! This is called human intelligence. Xianxia grinned. They were very familiar with this tactic, and almost all the spirit beasts blocking their way were killed this way. It seemed that it was also effective against golden core spirit beasts. Although they Everyone, pick up the pace. I have a bad feeling about this, Lung said softly. Using the wandering tactic would inevitably lead to a protracted battle. Based on previous experience, there was only one result, and that was when the opponent suffered enough and escaped. In order to maintain the formation, they did not have the ability to chase after them. Of course, this wasn't a bad outcome for the group. After all, if they really forced the enemy to a dead end, it would definitely struggle at all costs, and they might have to pay the price of death. Other than that, there was another risk. That was, a long delay would bring trouble. Just like last time, they were only facing a complete foundation establishment spirit beast. They could have easily taken it down, but because of the long delay, they attracted another late-stage foundation establishment spirit beast. Being surrounded from both front and back, Lung had a bad feeling about this, and now that feeling appeared again. Hearing Lung's words, everyone's heart skipped a beat, and they picked up the pace with all their might. They only wanted to chase this black praying mantis away as soon as possible. In the blink of an eye, the black praying mantis's leg armor had a few wounds, and it was broken by Lung's kick. Although losing a leg didn't affect it as much as a human, it still scared the hell out of it, a bunch of lunatics. In order to break its leg, Lung's group paid the price of 2 people, including Yu Bing, getting injured. This was completely different from the way they fought just now. They were basically exchanging injury for injury, and it wasn't an exaggeration to say that they were lunatics. Unfortunately, the black praying mantis was an existence comparable to a golden core spirit beast, and the way they fought would only make it angry. Unless they could seriously injure it, it would be impossible to scare it away like this. However, Lung's group didn't slow down their pace. Instead, they worked together to speed up their pace. They didn't know if their premonition was accurate, but as long as there was a 1 in 10,000 possibility, they couldn't ignore it. They had to chase this black praying mantis away as soon as possible, or else if there were other strong spirit beasts surrounding them and attacked them from both sides, the consequences would be unimaginable. However, most of the time, the more impatient one was, the more things would go against one's will. Just like now, Lung's group had increased their pace, but the effect was barely satisfactory. They had paid the price, but they still couldn't make their opponent waver. Instead, they were getting angrier and angrier, and it was getting harder to deal with. We can't go on like this. Lung was anxious. She knew that she had made a huge mistake. She believed that if it was Lin Yi, he wouldn't have sped up his pace and started attacking in such a situation. In the end, she still lacked actual combat experience. She was too green. Lung clenched her teeth. Since Lin Yi had entrusted everyone's safety to her, she had to bring everyone out of here. No matter what kind of danger they were in, she had to shoulder it alone. Chapter 5274. Not only Lung, but Lingshan and the others also realized the danger, but due to the limitation of their strength, they were far more helpless than Lung. Working together to maintain the formation was the only thing they could do. Just when the situation was in a stalemate, a voice came from behind along with applause. "Oh, looks like Lin Yi taught you guys pretty well, to be able to fight and even suppress a golden core stage spirit beast with this little strength. Not bad, not bad." Lung and the others were shocked when they heard the voice, and then they found a familiar figure on a tree branch not far behind them, Xue Jianfeng. Looking at Xue Jianfeng's ridiculing expression, everyone's heart instantly sank to the bottom. That ominous premonition just now was indeed right. When it rains, it pours. They actually encountered this fellow at this time. If it wasn't for the black praying mantis, Lung and the others might not be afraid of Xue Jianfeng. Although Xue Jianfeng was an early Golden Core stage master, he was almost defeated by Lung in the last Archean trials. Even without Lin here, as long as everyone worked together, they might not lose to Xue Jianfeng. But the problem was that there was still a Golden Core stage black praying mantis. In front of them was the black praying mantis, and behind them was Xue Jianfeng. Most importantly, these two were Golden Core stage existences. This situation was no different from a hopeless situation. With the history between Xue Jianfeng and Lin Yi, they didn't think that this guy would let go of such a great opportunity. Even if they used their toes to think, this guy would definitely hit them when they were down. Lung quickly signaled everyone to stop. It was no longer suitable to use the wandering tactic to deal with the black praying mantis. Compared to the black praying mantis, Xue Jianfeng was a more dangerous threat that needed to be guarded against. At the same time, the black praying mantis also stopped moving. Although it hated Lung and the others, it was not an idiot at this level. It also knew that the human behind it was a bigger threat to it. It could still fight and run when facing Lung and the others, but facing Xue Jianfeng, it might not be able to escape even if it wanted to. Big praying mantis, this is a master. I advise you to run away before you die. Chen Tian rolled his eyes and said. The black praying mantis was already planning to retreat. Hearing his words, he became even more spirited and said angrily, You're just a mere human scum. Stop boasting shamelessly. This is my territory. Do you think I'm scared? Hey, we're not trying to scare you. You can't even beat us as a mantis. How are you going to survive if he's a Golden Core master? Ziyu and the others said. You want to scare me away with just a few words? Do you think I'm a fool? The black praying mantis didn't believe him. Before it finished speaking, it charged toward Xue Jianfeng with a howl. This wasn't an impulsive move. Instead, it had thought it through. Although Cold and the others were not easy to deal with, they were not a real threat to it. It could escape at any time if the situation was not good, but this new human expert was different. It had to test the other party's strength first. If he was easy to deal with, then it would think of a way to kill him in one fell swoop. If he really wasn't easy to deal with, then it would be best to run. Seeing this, everyone smiled at each other and breathed a sigh of relief. They didn't know what the black praying mantis was planning, but this was the best situation for them. The danger of being pincered from both sides had been resolved with just a few words. This was truly a fluke. However, everyone's hearts only relaxed for a short moment before they suddenly tensed up again in the next moment. They were even more nervous than before. Xue Jianfeng didn't even move his but when facing the ferocious praying mantis. But when it got close, he casually slashed with his hand, and the black praying mantis didn't even have a chance to resist. They were easily chopped into 8 pieces on the spot. So fucking stinky. Xue Jianfeng's face was very ugly. He had purposely acted like it was nothing more than to show off in front of everyone. In the end, the black praying mantis was easily taken care of, but he didn't expect to be covered in stinky blood. He was green from head to toe, looking like a clown that had just been fished out of a dye vat. Unfortunately, Cold and the others weren't in the mood to laugh at him. They looked at each other as if they had seen a ghost. This guy was just an early phase Golden Core. How did he become so scary all of a sudden? Gold Core Paragon. Lung uttered these words with difficulty. Xue Jianfeng's attack just now was very simple and swift. Ordinary people might not be able to see through his true strength, but Lung was someone who had seen the world in the immemorial martial world. That was clearly the might of a Gold Core Paragon expert. Ling Shan and the others were all stunned by this word. How long had it been? He went from early phase to Golden Core Perfect in an instant. No matter how many pills he took, there wouldn't be such a heaven-defying effect, right? According to the knowledge of the ancient world, no matter how talented one was, it would take at least a few decades to go from early phase to Golden Core Perfect. This was already the limit. It was common for people to be stuck at this stage for hundreds or thousands of years. Shui Jianfeng, on the other hand, only took a few months to break through to the golden core stage. How was this possible? Such a horrifying leveling speed, not to mention Cold and the others. Even Lin Yi would be shocked if he knew about it. Of course, he was only shocked at the means of the core. As for Shui Jianfeng himself, he was nothing more than a piece of trash in his eyes. He wouldn't care about him at all. Yo, good eyesight. How is it? What do you think? Shui Jianfeng was still sitting on the tree trunk leisurely. He looked at everyone with a face full of arrogance and mockery, especially Cold. Both of them were genius disciples of the Snow Sword sect. In addition, Cold was a famous beauty. Shui Jianfeng had many thoughts about her. Unfortunately, Cold was unmoved by force or persuasion. Now that she came out to the common world to train, she fell in love with Lin Yi. She even turned the tables on him, almost causing him to fail miserably in the ancient trials. This was unbearable. Now that he had become a golden core perfect master, his greatest joy was to enjoy the expressions of those who went against him. The more shocked Cold was, the happier he felt. Unfortunately, Cold and the others were not very cooperative. The shocked expressions on their faces only lasted for a moment before disappearing. What was left was only a common enemy. Chapter 5275. Sunflower Bible? What does that mean? Shui Jianfeng was startled. He obviously didn't know about this common world joke. To practice this art, you must first castrate yourself. Don't you have these words on the first page of your art? Chen Tian chuckled. The others burst out in laughter. Even Lung Lung couldn't help but smile. She was initially on high alert, but now she wasn't so nervous anymore. Die, you bastard! Shui Jianfeng snapped back to reality and became furious. A mere Foundation establishment realm peak dared to make fun of him, a golden core full-cycle master. How reckless! With his current strength, it would be useless no matter how Lung Lung and the others worked together. Whoever he wanted to die would die. No one would be able to stop him. Shui Jianfeng made his move immediately, his entire body flying above everyone's heads, reaching out to grab Yu Bing and Wu Chentian's heads. He was planning to leave Lung Lung and Ling Shan alive and enjoy them later, but Yu Bing and Wu Chentian, these guys who didn't know what was good for them, shouldn't even think about living. You guys go first. With a loud shout, Lung Lung took the initiative to meet him. Although she almost succeeded in challenging someone of a higher level previously, facing the current Shui Jianfeng with her mere foundation building great circle was no different from an ant trying to shake a tree. However, she had no other choice. Ling Shan and the others didn't waste any time. They ran away without hesitation. Saying that they would live and die together would only be a joke. All they could do was to escape as soon as possible and not be a burden to Lung Lung. You think you can stop me? When Shui Jianfeng saw this, he couldn't help but reveal a mocking smile. Last time, he had been humiliated by Lung Lung. This time, it was a good opportunity for him to get back at her. He wanted to let her experience the difference between them and the taste of despair. Golden Core full cycle against Foundation establishment full cycle. It was an undeniable battle. Shui Jianfeng didn't even need to use his sword. It would be an insult to himself. Moreover, he only wanted to toy with Lung Lung. He didn't plan to take her life yet. Seeing Lung Lung's whip kick sweeping over, Shui Jianfeng smiled coldly as he raised his hand to block. He knew that he didn't even need to use his full strength. Lung Lung would fall on her own. Accompanied by the dull sound of a fist and a leg colliding, Shui Jianfeng's body suddenly paused. Following that, a strange expression appeared on his face. Cold was actually not repelled by him. He could not help but be stunned for a moment. How is this possible? With such a huge difference in strength, even if she didn't use her full strength, she should be heavily injured. She couldn't just not take a step back, right? This is... Shui Jianfeng hastily accepted the challenge, but the situation was far beyond his expectations. He, who had the advantage of an entire realm, was actually suppressed by Cold. Shui Jianfeng couldn't help but recall the situation in the primordial trials last time. It was the same at that time. As an early-stage gold core expert, he almost failed miserably at Lung Lung's hands. Now that he had become an expert in the golden core perfection realm, he thought that he could easily wipe away his previous humiliation. He didn't expect that he would fall into such a strange situation again. It was already a rare thing to fight an enemy of a higher realm. It was even more difficult to fight an enemy of a higher realm. As for someone like Cold who wanted to fight an enemy of a higher realm, it was something that had never happened before. It was simply a fantasy. What was even more ridiculous was that Xue Jianfeng was actually suppressed and couldn't break free for a while. Instant close-range combat was an extremely troublesome battle tactic, especially when it was coupled with the deceleration effect of Cold's ice prison mirror. Even Xue Jianfeng couldn't easily shake it off. It would be fine if that was all, but the strange state that Cold Lung was displaying right now was truly frightening. Not only was the cold air surrounding her body, even the exposed skin such as her palms and neck had turned into a cold gleam, as if they were formed into ice crystals. Xue Jianfeng couldn't figure out what was going on, but his pride would never allow him to be suppressed by a foundation-building perfection realm expert like Cold. After being forced to take 5 steps back, he suddenly gritted his teeth and stopped his body. He couldn't be bothered to catch his breath and forcefully counterattack with his palms. Doing so would easily cause him to suffer a backlash, but he couldn't care less as he was enraged. Bang! The two palms collided. This time, Xue Jianfeng had exerted his full strength. However, unexpectedly, Cold Lung didn't retreat. Not only did she not retreat, but her attacks became even fiercer. What the hell? Xue Jianfeng's eyes widened in an instant. He couldn't understand what was going on at all. There was only one thought in his mind. This world was too crazy. However, he was the leader of the younger generation in the ancient martial world after all. Although Cold Lung could barely suppress him, it was mainly because of the element of surprise. At most, she could only take the initiative in the battle. It was almost impossible for her to seriously injure him. After all, there was a gap of a whole realm between them. How could it be so easy to level the gap? After exchanging a few more blows, Xue Jianfeng finally figured out something. He realized that although he had been fighting with Cold Lung head-on every time, the moment when the blows were really exchanged, the force and vital energy that were transmitted to the opponent would always go astray inexplicably. Most of the force would be diverted to the side. In the end, it was estimated that not even 1/10 of the force would be effective on Cold Lung. Xue Jianfeng didn't believe it and tried a few more times. The result was the same every time. Amidst the shock, a thought suddenly flashed in his mind. He blurted out, "Could it be the legendary Ice Skin Jade Skin?" Ice Skin Jade Skin was not a mere description in the Ancient Alliance, especially in the Snow Sword faction. It was a real defensive martial art. It was said that only a few people with extremely special physiques had the opportunity to cultivate it. Once it was cultivated, it could easily disperse most of the attacks. Moreover, it was extremely durable. Even when fighting against an opponent of a higher realm, it would rarely be at a disadvantage. Chapter 5276. You just realized it? A hint of mockery flashed in Lung Lung's eyes. It was normal for others not to realize it. After all, Jade Skin had only appeared a few times in the archaic Jianghu. However, Xue Jianfeng was a real disciple of the Snow Sword School. He was really slow to recognize the martial arts of his school after such a long time. Impossible. Absolutely impossible. The martial arts manual of Jade Skin was destroyed a long time ago. Where did you get the martial arts manual? Xue Jianfeng still found it hard to believe. It was not unreasonable for him to be so sure. He had tried to practice Jade Skin in the beginning, and he even spent a lot of money for it. Unfortunately, he found out later that he had no talent in this aspect, so he destroyed half of the martial arts manual in a rage. Thanks to his father, who was the vice leader of the school, he could cover it up without anyone knowing. Otherwise, he would have been severely punished by the school. How could he succeed in practicing without even a martial arts manual? It's none of your business. Lung Lung snorted. Her martial arts manual did not come from the school, but from Lin. In the collection of martial arts manuals sent by Wang Xinyan and others, most of them only had entry-level martial arts manuals and basic martial arts manuals purchased from the black market. However, there were a few martial arts manuals and martial arts manuals that covered almost all the manuals and martial arts manuals, such as the Snow Sword School where Wei Shenjin was from. Since Lung Lung had already mastered the Drawing Ground Prison and the Ice Prison Mirror, which were extremely threatening skills, she would not consider forcefully breaking through to the Golden Core stage in the short term. Therefore, in the last month before the start of the Archaic Trials, other than consolidating her level, she spent most of her remaining energy on practicing a new skill, which was the jade skin that Lin Yi had chosen for her. Strictly speaking, her shattered ice physique did not completely meet the requirements of jade skin. She could not learn jade skin in such a short time like painted ground and broken ice mirror. But her compatibility with jade skin was still above 80%. So, she had made some progress over the past month, and now it was coming in handy. Good, good, good. So what if you have jade skin? It's nothing more than a little endurance. Apart from speeding up the depletion of your dwindling physical strength and true qi, it simply can't harm a single hair of mine. What's the fart use? Xue Jianfeng said with a cold smile. Although he was trying to comfort himself, what he said was indeed true. Jade skin was just a defensive martial arts skill without any offensive ability. At most, it could only make cold more resistant to attacks, but it could not fundamentally change the status of the two of them. However, Lung Lung never expected to defeat Xue Jianfeng. That wasn't realistic. She only wanted to stall him and buy more time for Lingshan and the others to escape. And so far her strategy had succeeded. Almost there. At this moment, Cold's breathing became rather heavy. If she really wanted to hold Xue Jianfeng back, it was not enough to rely on jade skin alone. She also had to engage in close combat. No matter which one it was, it would consume a lot of her Zhen Qi. In addition, she had already consumed a lot of her Zhen Qi before. Holding on for half an hour was the limit of her endurance. Any longer and she would be exhausted. Lung Lung took a deep breath and forced Xue Jianfeng to retreat once again. She then turned around and fled without hesitation. Hee, you still want to escape at this time? Aren't you too naive? Xue Jianfeng immediately chased after her with a cold smile. Although Lung Lung's speed was not considered slow, the gap between their strengths was there. Unless she had a skill like Lin Yi's, it was almost impossible to get rid of her opponent. In the blink of an eye, Lung Lung's back was hit by a palm. Although she relied on jade skin to absorb most of the force, she still spat out a mouthful of blood. However, her feet did not stop at all. Instead, she used the force of the palm to escape even faster. Let's see how long you can last. At this moment, Xue Jianfeng had completely thrown Lingshan and the others to the back of his mind. To be precise, he did not care about these people at all. Only Lung Lung in front of him, he had to get rid of her. In less than a year's time, Lung Lung had rushed from the early phase of foundation building to the full circle of foundation building. She even mastered powerful skills like Painted Prison and Ice Prison Mirror. Now that she had mastered Jade Skin, she could actually cross a whole level to fight with him for so long. The potential that Lung Lung displayed was too terrifying. Even Xue Jianfeng, who was proud and arrogant, had to admit that if he continued to let her be, he might be stepped on by Lung Lung one day. He might as well kill her while she was still in the cradle. A cold light flashed, and Xue Jianfeng immediately unsheathed his sword. Lung Lung only felt a chill on her back. Her back was immediately hit by the sword, and a glaring flower of blood spurted out. She's actually not dead? Xue Jianfeng looked at Lung Lung, who was still running away, and was stunned. He was not pretending to use his sword. He had used his full strength, but he did not expect that it would only leave a small wound on her back. Jadeskin's defense was indeed amazing. Again, I'd like to see how many times you can take my sword, Xue Jianfeng said ferociously. At this point, Xue Jianfeng did not hide his intention to kill anymore. It was a pity to kill such a beautiful woman like Lung Lung, but he could always find another one. However, if Lung Lung was allowed to grow, it would be his turn to worry about his life. The two of them ran and chased. In less than a moment, they had passed through dozens of miles of dense forest. At this time, Lung Lung's back was already dripping with blood. There were more than a dozen wounds of different sizes. She was only able to hold on with jade skin. Otherwise, she would have died a long time ago. Even so, Lung was on the verge of collapsing. Not only was she bleeding from more than a dozen wounds, but most importantly, her physical strength and true qi were almost at their limits. Soon. It should be not far ahead. Lung kept brainwashing herself along the way. Only in this way could she barely hold on and not collapse. They had just passed by this place yesterday, but at that time, they sensed that there was an unusually strong aura of a spirit beast, so they did not dare to approach it rashly. In the end, they took a detour carefully. But now, this unknown powerful spirit beast had become her only chance of survival. She had to find a way to alarm this unknown spirit beast and make it target Xue Jianfeng. Only in this way could Lung escape this disaster. There was no other way. Xue Jianfeng soon noticed something strange. As an expert in Gold Core Paragon, his perception range was naturally much wider than Lung's. He immediately understood Lung's intention with a thought. Without caring about anything else, he leaped up high and a huge white sword light fell from the sky silently. This was the strongest move he had mastered at the moment, 9 Heaven's Sword Fall. Chapter 5277. Lung stopped abruptly and sighed softly. Farewell Lin. Lin Yi had entrusted Lingshan and the others to her, and now she had done the best she could. Even if she could not completely ensure everyone's safety, she had a clear conscience and could die in peace. At the last moment when Lung closed her eyes and waited for her death, a silhouette suddenly appeared beside her. Then, a familiar ice-cold aura materialized and soared into the sky, blocking Xue Jianfeng's 9 Heaven Sword. Although it was less than half a second, this half a second was enough for him to save Lung from danger. Merciless ice force? Xue Jianfeng's eyelids twitched. This familiar ice-cold aura was actually merciless ice force. The identity of this person was obvious. It was Bing Wuqing. It's you. At this moment, Xue Jianfeng was not the only one who was shocked. Even Lung, who had just been saved, was so shocked that she could not speak after seeing the appearance of the person who had come. Why would Bing Wuqing save her for no reason at all? Lin Yi had never told anyone about the fact that Bing Wuqing and the others had been secretly subdued by him. Only 2 people knew about this. One was himself, and the other was Lin Dongfang. Lung did not know the inside story, and was of course as shocked as Xue Jianfeng. Let's go. Bing Wuqing had no intention of explaining the whole story at all, and immediately gestured for Lung to escape first. Although Lung was extremely weak at the moment, with the large amount of elixirs that Lin Yi had given her to heal her injuries, it wouldn't take long for her to recover. As long as she was careful, self-preservation shouldn't be a problem. Thank you. Lung knew that this was not the time to be long-winded. She thanked her and immediately turned to leave. Not only did she have to heal her injuries, but she also had to meet up with Lingshan and the others before they went far. As for why Bing Wuqing saved her, this question could only be explored later. Seeing Lung escape, Xue Jianfeng panicked and wanted to attack again. However, merciless ice force had already enveloped him. His heart skipped a beat, and he did not dare to act rashly. He turned to look at Bing Wuqing with fear. What? You helped them? Xue Jianfeng sized Bing Wuqing up again with an unfriendly expression. Logically speaking, Bing Wuqing should be Lin Yi's enemy, and she had even joined the center together with him. What was the meaning of this fellow-saving cult? I'm happy, Bing Wuqing said indifferently, her face expressionless. This is a mission given to me by my superiors. How dare you obstruct me? Where did you get the guts to do so? Xue Jianfeng snorted coldly. In the past, due to the difference in their abilities, he had to be somewhat respectful when facing Bing Wuqing. However, there was no need for that now. Is that so? That's your mission, and it has nothing to do with me. The order I received was just not to provoke Lin Yi, Bing Wuqing said nonchalantly. Xue Jianfeng could not help but choke. He was a little lacking in confidence, because it was a strict order passed down from the center's headquarters not to provoke Lin. He had urged the bespectacled professor to deal with the people around Lin Yi, but he had acted on his own accord. It was fine to play tricks in the dark, but he could not bring it up in the open. Otherwise, he would be disobeying orders. Even the bespectacled professor might not have the guts to do so, let alone him. Then let me ask you, You were clearly only at the later stage of the Golden Elixir realm. How did your abilities suddenly become Golden Elixir realm perfected? You were actually hiding your abilities? Shui Jianfeng said with a frown. Bing Wuqing had blocked his sword falls from the ninth heaven with only the materialized merciless ice force. Even if it was only for half an instant, it was enough to prove that this fellow's abilities were at least at the same level as his. She was already a Golden Elixir realm perfected expert. One had to know that merciless ice force was merely an aura, and was not strictly an offensive or defensive move. Just the thought of Bing Wuqing being able to achieve such a feat with merciless ice force alone was shocking. Even Shui Jianfeng had to admit that although they were at the same realm, if they were to really fight, the other party's chances of winning were obviously higher than his. Same here. Aren't you the same? Bing Wuqing glanced at him, and the corners of her mouth curled into a mocking arc. She said, "Do you think that you can surpass me just because you ditched me and secretly followed Feng to court my favor? You actually know about it?" Shui Jianfeng was even more shocked. Previously, the bespectacled doctor had clearly told him that the Central Headquarters Focus Training Program was strictly confidential, and that it would definitely not be revealed to anyone. How did this fellow know about it? Could you really do something like this without anyone knowing? Bing Wuqing glanced at him from the corner of her eyes. Could it be that you've also joined the Focus Training Program? Shui Jianfeng became more and more surprised. After thinking about it carefully, before he took the initiative to court Bing Wuqing, the bespectacled doctor had obviously valued Bing Wuqing more, so it was not impossible for him to join the Focus Training Program. Bing Wuqing smiled faintly. She neither admitted nor denied it, and in Shui Jianfeng's eyes, she became more and more unfathomable. Of course, there was no need for him to reveal his relationship with Lin Yi. He could let this fellow be suspicious on his own. As expected, the more Shui Jianfeng thought about it, the more he realized that Bing Wuqing's leap from the Gold Core later stage to the Gold Core consummation was also the last month before he joined the center's focus training program. Although it was not as exaggerated as his, to his knowledge, advancing 2 levels in a short month was something that only the center could do. As for why Bing Wuqing did not advance 6 levels in a row like him, but stopped at the Gold Core consummation, the reason was not difficult to find. Because when he first joined the focus training program, he had been told that the current technology of the center in the secular world could at most quickly elevate them to the Gold Core consummation, and that was already the limit. As for the nascent soul stage, that technology was still in the experimental stage, and it was far from being mature enough to be officially implemented. With Bing Wuqing's interference, it was no longer realistic for Shui Jianfeng to chase after Cold and the others. Putting aside the question of whether he could find these people again in a short period of time, even if he did find them, it would be useless. Although Bing Wuqing did not speak much, her actions just now had made her attitude clear. If Shui Jianfeng dared to touch Cold and the others, she would attack him. Facing Bing Wuqing with the power she had accumulated over the years, and the unfathomable skills she had displayed just now, Shui Jianfeng really did not have much confidence to fight her head-on. There would be no benefits if he won, and if he lost, he would be snubbed. Wouldn't that be a waste of effort? Why are you protecting Cold like this? Shui Jianfeng asked in a low voice. I told you just now I'm happy. Bing Wuqing was still expressionless, and no one could tell what she was thinking. Chapter 5278. Bing Wuqing stopped talking and just stared at him. To ensure that Cold and the others could escape safely, she had to keep an eye on Shui Jianfeng for at least an hour. Otherwise, with their meager strength, Shui Jianfeng would catch up to them in the blink of an eye. While the two of them were confronting each other, their eyelids suddenly twitched. A powerful and ferocious aura of a spirit beast was rapidly approaching them from afar, and in the blink of an eye, it was right in front of them. It was a lizard, but not an ordinary one. It was more than 10 meters long from head to tail, and its entire body was covered in silver-gray scales. Its huge mouth was filled with ferocious sharp teeth, and from time to time, a lump of saliva would flow out of it. A pungent stench assailed their nostrils, and the saliva actually corroded a deep pit into the ground when it fell. It was truly frightening, and their scalps tingled. The primordial giant lizard. Shui Jianfeng and Bing Wuqing blurted out almost at the same time. This image was undoubtedly one of the 10 most ferocious and terrifying spirit beasts in the primordial underworld. They didn't expect it to exist in this place. The primordial giant lizard didn't stop, nor did it have the slightest intention to talk nonsense with the two of them. It roared and charged straight at Bing Wuqing, who was the closest to it. However, this was not strange. The primordial monitor lizards were famous for being powerful, and they were also famous for being brainless. Other than having an extremely strong sense of territory, this fellow's mind was basically a mass of chaos. It did not have any clear consciousness, and only had the most basic beastly instincts left. At its level, other spirit beasts would have developed spiritual intelligence long ago, and their intelligence wouldn't be much lower than that of humans. Unfortunately, the primordial giant lizard was recognized as one of the most retarded spirit beasts. No matter how powerful it was still a wild beast that only knew how to kill. Bing Wuqing frowned slightly at the sight, and quickly retreated. Unexpectedly, although this primordial giant lizard looked very cumbersome, its movements weren't clumsy at all. Instead, it was extremely agile, and its speed was far above that of ordinary human experts. Even Bing Wuqing was caught up in the blink of an eye. Bing Wuqing was startled by the other party's foul-smelling saliva as it bit at her. She immediately unleashed her ruthless ice force, which she was best at. The speed of the primordial giant lizard instantly decreased. Just like the black praying mantis that Lung Lung and the others had encountered earlier, it was the most irresistible type of ice attack, which was extremely effective. Bing Wuqing seized the opportunity to escape. This primordial giant iguana was obviously a being comparable to a golden core perfected expert. If she was bitten by it, she would either die or be severely injured. That mouthful of saliva was especially horrifying, and if she came into contact with even the slightest bit of it, she would immediately be corroded into a large hole. Even if her vitality was strong enough to survive, she would still be plagued with illnesses in the future, and she would never be able to recover in this lifetime. However, before she could widen the distance between them to more than 30 feet, the primordial giant lizard's scarlet tongue suddenly shot out like a sharp arrow, targeting Bing Wuqing. Its speed was more than 10 times faster than her body movement technique, and Bing Wuqing couldn't escape at all. Just as she was about to suffer, she quickly formed a seal with her hands, and a thick ice wall suddenly appeared behind her. Although the primordial giant lizard's scarlet tongue came at her fiercely and broke through the ice wall almost instantly, the ice wall kept getting thicker as it was broken. Eventually, she managed to block the attack by a hair's breadth. Phew! This lizard! Bing Wuqing heaved a sigh of relief with lingering fear. On the other side, Shui Jianfeng couldn't hide the regret on his face. How good would it have been if Bing Wuqing had been killed by the primordial giant lizard just now? Not only would they have one less troublemaker, they would also have one less competitor. It was killing two birds with one stone. What a pity! Bing Wuqing could guess his intentions even with her toes. Therefore, after she withstood the primordial giant lizard's first wave of attack, she didn't plan to fight it head-on. After all, even if she could win that way, Shui Jianfeng would only benefit from it. Therefore, she chose to retreat. Under such circumstances, it was best to preserve her strength. What the fuck? You're too cunning. Shui Jianfeng was just about to gloat when he saw Bing Wuqing fleeing in his direction, with the primordial giant lizard chasing after her relentlessly. In the blink of an eye, the girl and the lizard were right in front of him. Shui Jianfeng's reaction was a beat too slow, and he was left behind by Bing Wuqing in an instant. The primordial giant lizard, which was right in front of him, bit at him again. Shui Jianfeng hurriedly used his sword to block it, only to find that the lizard didn't just have thick skin and thick flesh, but more importantly, its silver-gray scales were too hard. Not only did his full-force strike fail to break through the scales, but it also caused his right hand to go numb from the impact, and he almost dropped his sword. At the same time, the primordial monitor lizard that had missed its bite used the same trick again, and its scarlet tongue lashed out once more. Even though it was extremely soft and didn't possess any offensive power, it was covered in the most terrifying saliva, and as long as it came into contact with even a little bit of it, one would immediately be done for. At this moment, Shui Jianfeng's body was a little stiff from the recoil. If he hadn't seen this move just now, he would definitely be at a great disadvantage if he was caught off guard. Fortunately, he was prepared. The moment the primordial giant lizard's scarlet tongue lashed out, he immediately descended from the sky and used the 9 heavens sword fall, cutting off the tongue with his sword. A several-foot-long severed tongue bounced around on the ground. The primordial giant lizard, which had suffered a great loss, immediately let out an ear-piercing roar. The veins all over its body twitched violently, and its already ferocious eyes turned bloodshot. It was clearly going berserk. Feeling the violent aura emanating from the primordial giant lizard, Shui Jianfeng's heart skipped a beat. He had poked a hornet's nest. It clearly only had the spiritual intelligence of a wild beast, but it could be ranked as one of the 10 most terrifying spiritual beasts in the ancient martial world. There was no doubt about the primordial giant lizard's strength. It was almost invincible among those of the same level. If its original battle power was 1, then after going berserk, its battle power was at least 5, or even more. Facing such an existence, with Shui Jianfeng's current strength, even if he could win, he would definitely lose his life. Moreover, Bing Wuqing was watching him covetously from the side. Shui Jianfeng had already planned to attack Bing Wuqing earlier, so it was hard to say if Bing Wuqing wasn't planning to do the same now. Once the primordial giant lizard went berserk, Shui Jianfeng turned and ran without hesitation. This time, he no longer cared about hiding. It was clearly a hot day, but with every step he took, he would leave a clear snow print on the ground, which then quickly melted. Every time a snow print melted, the speed of his movement technique would increase by a notch. By the time he crossed 10 snow prints, his movement technique speed had increased by at least 2 times. Chapter 5279. Although Shui Jianfeng was also the leader of the younger generation in the small Jianghu of the immemorial era, a lot of points came from his father, the deputy head of the Snow Sword School. If it was just based on Shui Jianfeng's talent alone, he was at most more outstanding. He couldn't be compared to a true genius like Ling Tianyu. Even Leng Leng could leave him far behind. As the leader of the younger generation, Bing Wuqing was an absolute genius. Naturally, she would look down on a weak leader like Shui Jianfeng. However, she did not expect this guy to have some skills. Traceless snow steps was one of the top movement techniques of the Snow Sword faction. The number of people in the entire Snow Sword faction who could master this movement technique could be counted on one hand. It was not easy. Shui Jianfeng was running towards Bing Wuqing. Now that the primordial giant lizard had gone berserk, its speed could not be measured with common sense. Even if he had traceless snow steps, he might not be able to get rid of it. He might as well do what Bing Wuqing did just now and put the blame on his opponent. When 2 people were being chased by a tiger, they did not necessarily have to outrun the tiger in order to escape. They just had to outrun the other person. This was common sense that everyone knew. Both of them were Golden Core Paragon experts, and they both came from the Snow Sword faction. In this aspect, it was obvious that Shui Jianfeng, who had the traceless snow steps as a base, was at an advantage. Unless Bing Wuqing also knew traceless snow steps. Unfortunately, Bing Wuqing had not put much effort into this aspect. After all, even with her talent, it was not easy to master traceless snow steps. Moreover, this movement technique was not very compatible with him. In layman's terms, it did not match his temperament. If she were to forcefully cultivate it, it would only result in half the effort. A rational and realistic person like Bing Wuqing would certainly not do such a thing. However, Bing Wuqing was a little regretful now. If she had known, she would have spent twice the time to practice it. That way, at least she would not have fallen into such an awkward situation. In a short period of time, he had been left behind by traceless snow steps, and the brainless and frenzied primordial giant lizard had automatically shifted its hatred to him, who was closest to it. Hee, I'll go first. You have fun with it. Shui Jianfeng laughed proudly and left. It wasn't that he didn't want to stay and see Bing Wuqing's embarrassed look, but he was well aware of how terrifying Bing Wuqing was. He knew very well that if he were to get carried away and stay, Bing Wuqing would definitely have 100 ways to drag him back into the battle. So, for safety's sake, it was better to leave first. Humph. Can you escape? Bing Wuqing had no choice but to bite the bullet and attack the primordial giant lizard. At the same time, she glanced in the direction that Xue Jianfeng had left an indescribable look flickering in her eyes. If someone like Lin Yi, who had an extremely sharp divine sense, had been present, he would have noticed that there was a faintly discernible thread of ice on his fingertip that was connected to the direction that Xue Jianfeng had left in. At the same time, on the other side, Lin Yi and the others were rushing towards the direction where Cold and the others were. However, halfway through the journey, the water lily doppelganger that was responsible for leading the way for Lin Yi suddenly stopped. "Why did you stop?" Lin Yi frowned. He was in a hurry to meet up with Cold and the others, so he had no time to waste with this fellow. "The group that you're looking for has split up," said the water lily doppelganger. "Did they encounter the spirit beast that you were talking about?" asked Lin Yi hurriedly. "Yes, a woman stayed behind to delay them, and the rest have safely evacuated." The water lily doppelganger nodded, and then added, "However, their trouble isn't the spirit beast that I was talking about just now, but another human expert. His strength doesn't seem to be simple." "A human expert?" Lin Yi's eyelids twitched. Based on the water lily's experience, someone who could make it praise as having strength that was not simple must be a golden core expert. This time, the only golden core experts who had come in were Bing Wuqing and Xue Jianfeng. Bing Wuqing was on their side, so the one who was making things difficult for Cold and the others could only be Xue Jianfeng. "Oh, that expert has chased that woman to the primordial giant lizard's territory. There's nothing I can do about that." The water lily doppelganger feigned helplessness and spread its hands. "What do you mean? Why can't you do anything about the primordial giant lizard's territory?" Lin Yi glanced at it. This fellow's original body was trapped in the space of the jade pendant, and it would only take a single thought to take its life. There was no need to be afraid that it would play any tricks. "Do you know how I found out about these things?" the water lily doppelganger asked instead of answering. "Aren't you relying on those flowers and trees?" Lin Yi frowned. "That's right, I rely on my primordial spirit to communicate with them to find out about these things. Basically, as long as there are plants, I can grasp every movement, big or small, but only the primordial giant lizard's territory is not within my control." The water lily doppelganger shook its head. Duan Muyu asked on its behalf. "Because wherever the primordial giant lizard passes, there will be saliva left behind. Just a little bit of it can strangle the intelligence of all the plants. Then, even if the plants are alive, it's useless, because without intelligence, there's no way to communicate with them. Naturally, they're out of my control." The water lily doppelganger's expression was quite sincere when it said this, and there was no sign of it lying. "Plants also have intelligence?" Fei Yongsheng came over and asked curiously. "Of course, as long as the plants have a bit of climate, they will have intelligence. As for those elixirs in your eyes, they're even more outstanding. Otherwise, how could they gather so much spiritual qi of heaven and earth to nourish them?" the water lily doppelganger asked in return. Upon hearing the word elixirs, Fei Yongsheng's face immediately turned gloomy. The 2 bags of elixirs that he had painstakingly collected in the underground had already been thrown away when he encountered the Kappa. Now that he had come out of the treasure mountain empty-handed, it really pained him to think about it. The main reason was that Lin Yi was worried about the safety of Cold and the others, so he didn't bother to accompany him back to the treasure mountain. Moreover, he didn't dare to go back alone, so he could only silently bleed in his heart. "What are you going to do?" Duan Mu looked at Lin Yi and asked. Lin Yi pondered for a moment. He was sure that it was Cold who was holding Xue Jianfeng back. He thought for a moment and said, "Other than that girl, are the others in any danger?" "Not really. It seems that if there are no accidents, we should be able to reach the river of consciousness smoothly." The water lily doppelganger smiled mysteriously. "If that's the case, then bring me to the primordial giant lizard's territory now." Lin Yi decided immediately. Since Lingshan and the others were not in danger, there was nothing to worry about. The most important thing now was to hurry and save Cold. Chapter 5280. Is it very strong? Lin Yi was slightly taken aback. He had never heard of an ancient monitor lizard, but since even an existence like the brain-eating bug did not dare to step into its territory, There was no doubt about its strength. It is indeed very strong. The ancient monitor lizard is recognized as one of the 10 most terrifying spirit beasts in the Archaic Alliance. Legend has it that unless it is a nascent soul-old monster, all human cultivators must avoid it. Duanmuyu confirmed. It's fine if it's just powerful, but in this place, apart from that, sir, the brain-eating bug and I are the most powerful. It's at most on par with us. There's another more important reason why no one is willing to provoke it. It's brainless, the water lily doppelganger snickered. No brains. Linny glanced at it. The most terrifying thing about the ancient monitor lizard is its saliva. It is almost the most terrifying and evil saliva in the world. Those with a weak physique will die if they touch it. Even if their physique is strong enough, they can only linger on and become a tuberculosis ghost, never to be a normal person again. Perhaps it is affected by its own saliva. The ancient monitor lizard is completely a brainless lunatic. There is no way to communicate with it. Otherwise, it might be on an equal footing with me and the brain-eating bug, the water lily doppelganger said casually. So strange? All the more reason for me to go and see. Linny made up his mind and then looked at Duanmuyu and said, since Miss Duanmu is going to the River of Divine Knowledge, then let's say goodbye. The ancient monitor lizard was so terrifying. Lin Yi had to take the risk for Colt. Otherwise, even he would not be willing to deal with such a thing. Duanmuyu was just a chance acquaintance, so naturally, she would not take the risk. He took the initiative to say this to give the other party a way out, so as to avoid embarrassment. Unexpectedly, Duanmuyu said, we can go to the River of Divine Knowledge anytime. It is rare to have the opportunity to see the glory of the ancient monitor lizard. I want to go with you. Brother Lin, you don't mind, right? Linny took a deep look at her. He knew that Duanmuyu wanted to take this opportunity to return the favor. After all, he had done her a great favor. After thinking for a while, he smiled and said, in that case, let's go together. Lin Yi was just about to have his water lily clone lead the way to the primordial monitor lizard's territory when Fei Yangxing suddenly put on a sheepish smile. Senior, I'll only be a burden to you if I go with you. Why don't I not go? As you wish. Lin Yi waved his hand. Duanmuyu might still be able to help, but with Fei Yangyang's meager strength, facing an existence like the primordial giant lizard, he would only be sending himself to his death. Not only would he not be able to help, he would even be a hindrance to Lin Yi. Forcing him to follow them was no different from sending him to his death, so it was better for him to stay. Thank you for your understanding, Senior. Have a safe journey. Fei Yangyang was overjoyed. He was afraid that Lin Yi would make him follow them as cannon fodder. He didn't expect Lin Yi to be so easygoing. Although it was extremely dangerous for him to move alone in the dense forest with his meager strength, it was better than sending himself to his death in the primordial giant lizard's territory. As long as he was careful and didn't think too much about treasures, he should be able to keep his life. Lin Yi couldn't be bothered to argue with such a small character. He immediately let his water lily clone lead the way and set off with Duanmuyu to the primordial giant lizard's territory. Meanwhile, Fei Yangyang took the map given by Xianxia and studied it for a long time, then walked in the direction of the River of Divine Knowledge. Moving alone, Fei Yangyang was careful with every step he took. If there was even the slightest movement, he would immediately find a place to hide. Although this was a little too cautious, the advantage was that he wouldn't die easily. After all, safety came first. 2 hours later, Fei Yangyang suddenly stopped in his tracks. He felt that his surroundings were a little too quiet. He didn't care whether there was any danger or not. He quickly hid behind the trunk of a nearby tree. His intuition was right. In a short while, he sensed a powerful aura approaching from afar. However, it wasn't a spirit beast, but Xue Jianfeng. At this time, Xue Jianfeng had already shaken off Bing Wuqing and the primordial giant lizard. When he passed by this area, he suddenly appeared in front of Fei Yangyang. With Fei Yangyang's meager strength, it was impossible for him to hide from Xue Jianfeng's divine knowledge. Xue. Senior brother Xue. Oh no, Master's uncle Xue. Fei Yangyang was so shocked that he stuttered. Why are you here? Xue Jianfeng looked him up and down. Is it strange that I'm here? Fei Yongyang couldn't help but be stunned. Everyone was heading to the river of divine knowledge, and he was walking in this direction. Wasn't this normal? Of course it's strange. If I'm not mistaken, you should have been eaten by that plant spirit beast. Tell me, how did you escape? Shui Jianfeng's eyes narrowed into slits. How did you know? Fei Yongyang was shocked. He had never seen Shui Jianfeng before. Shui Jianfeng coldly snorted and said, "Nonsense. The path you chose must have passed through that plant spirit beast territory. Even I had to expend a tremendous amount of effort to escape. With your insignificant strength, how could you have made it this far alive? Have you fought with the water lily protector before?" It was only then that Fei Yangxing realized that Bing Wuqing and Shui Jianfeng had set off earlier than him. Judging from Shui Jianfeng's words, he must have chosen the same path as him and Duan Muyu, and must have experienced some extremely dangerous situations, which was why he had such a question. Water lily protector? Shui Jianfeng frowned and muttered to himself, so that thing's true form is a water lily. How could it be a water lily that can control so many powerful plants to surround me at the same time? So you haven't seen its true form? Fei Yongyang was stunned again. He had thought that Shui Jianfeng had fought directly with the water lily protector like Lin. He didn't expect that he had only fought indirectly with the plants controlled by the water lily protector. He couldn't help but feel a bit of contempt in his heart. From the looks of it, Shui Jianfeng had at most fought with something similar to the twin piranha flower, while Lin Yi had actually taken down the water lily protector's true form. The difference between the two was obvious. Admittedly, Shui Jianfeng was a high and mighty golden core expert. To Fei Yongyang, he was a high and mighty existence that he could only look up to. However, a heaven-defying expert like Lin Yi could simply ignore the level suppression. The fact that he could take down the water lily protector proved everything. Therefore, there was no doubt that Lin Yi was stronger than Shui Jianfeng. Chapter 5281. You've seen it? Then how did you survive? Shui Jianfeng looked at him suspiciously. Of course I've seen it, but I was lucky enough to meet Senior Lin Yi, and he saved me. Fei Yangxing's tone involuntarily revealed a bit of pride, and even a bit of bragging. After all, apart from Lung Lung and the others, there were not many people who could be saved by Lin Yi, which was also a rare honor. Lin? Would he take the initiative to save you? Shui Jianfeng glanced at him with a bit of disbelief in his eyes. He knew that Fei Yangxing had some relationship with Lin Yi, but in his opinion, it was purely Lin Yi who forced Fei Yangxing to do hard labor for him. He did not believe that Fei Yangxing was one of Lin Yi's people, or else he would have punished this guy long ago. Of course. Fei Yangxing said shamelessly. Although it was true that Lin Yi saved him, it was purely a coincidence. If Lin Yi knew that he was trapped by the Bingdi piranha flower from the beginning, he might not have wasted time for him at all. This was simply Fei Yangxing's wishful thinking. Shui Jianfeng was dubious. He did not believe Fei Yangxing's words, but it was a fact that this guy was safe and sound. He said with a faint smile, "So you have a good relationship with Lin Yi?" About the same. Fei Yangxing was a little guilty at this time. It was not because he was guilty of making friends with Lin Yi, but because he remembered that Shui Jianfeng and Lin Yi were not on good terms. What if Lin Yi killed him to vent his anger? He would not be able to escape with his little strength. In that case, follow me first. Maybe Lin Yi will come to you in a while. Shui Jianfeng thought for a while and said, follow you? Fei Yangxing was shocked. If it was before, he would definitely want to hug Shui Jianfeng's leg in this kind of place. But now, he had automatically attached the label of Lin Yi to make himself look better. Would it be good to follow Shui Jianfeng at this time? You're not willing? Shui Jianfeng squinted at him. It's not that I'm unwilling, but what does it have to do with you whether Senior Lin Yi comes to find me or not? Fei Yangxing muttered suspiciously. He didn't know what the other party was planning, but he couldn't help but feel uneasy. Cut the crap. Are you leaving or not? Shui Jianfeng glared. Let's go. I'll go with you. Fei Yangxing was taken aback. He didn't dare to argue with Shui Jianfeng face to face. Moreover, it wasn't like there were no benefits for him to follow Shui Jianfeng. At the very least, he wouldn't fall into the mouths of other spirit beasts, and his safety would be guaranteed. However, in private, Fei Yangsheng couldn't help but complain in his heart. This guy must have some ulterior motives for bringing him along. When Senior Lin Yi came later, he would kill him. So what if he was a gold core expert? Even Lung Lung almost couldn't defeat him last time, let alone Senior Lin. Senior Lin Yi could even subdue the Water Lotus Protector. You Shui Jianfeng are nothing. After taking 2 steps, Fei Yangsheng suddenly asked, where are we going? Do you still need to ask? Of course, we're going to the River of Divine Knowledge. Shui Jianfeng said and took the lead to walk forward. With his strength, he naturally didn't need to be as careful as Fei Yangsheng. Unless it was an existence like the ancient giant lizard, ordinary spirit beasts wouldn't even have time to hide from him. If they didn't have eyes, the black praying mantis would be a good example. Fei Yangsheng was a little worried that Shui Jianfeng would bring him to some dangerous place, but when he heard it was the River of Divine Knowledge, he was immediately relieved. The 2 of them walked toward the River of Divine Knowledge one after the other. They walked peacefully for 4 to 6 hours. Suddenly, Shui Jianfeng, who was walking in front, was stunned. Then, his expression changed drastically. What the hell? Why did they chase us here? Who? Fei Yangsheng asked cautiously. He couldn't help but feel happy in his heart. He thought Shui Jianfeng was talking about Lin Yi and Duan Muyu. Good luck to you. Shui Jianfeng laughed coldly. In a flash, he was about to shake off Fei Yangsheng and leave alone. Snow prints appeared under his feet. He had used the traceless snow steps. Before Fei Yangsheng could figure out what was going on, he heard a loud rumbling sound coming from afar. In a moment, it was right in front of him. When he saw clearly who was causing this huge commotion, he was instantly scared out of his wits. With a pale face, he stammered. The primordial giant lizard. It wasn't just the primordial giant lizard. Bing Wuqing had also appeared. Compared to before, Bing Wuqing was obviously in a much more difficult situation. The primordial giant lizard had more than 10 wounds, both shallow and deep. It was in an even more violent state than before. It couldn't be helped. The primordial giant lizard was too fast. Bing Wuqing couldn't shake it off even with her merciless ice force. Every time, she could only stall it for a while before escaping on her own. Then, the primordial giant lizard would chase after her relentlessly. Bing Wuqing would try to stall it for a while. This cycle repeated all the way until they were here. Logically speaking, every spiritual beast had their own territory. Apart from a few special reasons, these spiritual beasts rarely left their territories. That was because doing so would be equivalent to openly declaring war against other spiritual beasts. Bing Wuqing thought that she would be fine as long as she escaped from the primordial giant lizard's territory. However, it turned out that she had been overthinking. This primordial giant lizard didn't care about these miscellaneous things at all. It was just stubbornly chasing after her. The other spiritual beasts didn't even dare to stop it when they saw it. Chapter 5282. Fei Yangsheng hurriedly took out a short knife. This was a treasure he had obtained by chance during a trial in his early years. It was indestructible and could cut through iron like mud. However, when his short knife sliced through the ice threads, he did not encounter any resistance at all. What made Fei Yangsheng dumbfounded was that after the short knife sliced through, the ice threads did not break. They were still hanging in the air, undamaged. Fei Yangsheng was dumbfounded for a moment before he suddenly realized that these ice threads were not solid ice threads at all. They were formed by the condensation of divine senses. No wonder his skin and flesh did not break when he touched them, and he did not bleed. Fei Yangsheng was not the only one who was obstructed by the ice threads. Even Shui Jianfeng, who had left first, was forced to retreat. He looked at Bing Wuqing with an ugly expression and asked, "What is the meaning of this?" "Nothing, I just intend to finish it off here. Don't you want to join in the fun?" Bing Wuqing said expressionlessly. Without a doubt, these ice threads formed by the divine senses were her handiwork. "Do you think you can trap me with this little trick?" Shui Jianfeng snorted coldly. "Whether you can trap me or not, you've already tried it, haven't you?" Bing Wuqing gave a rare grin as she dodged the primordial giant lizard's attack. Shui Jianfeng's expression immediately turned even uglier. Indeed, as Bing Wuqing had said, he had already tried it just now. If he could get rid of those divine sense ice threads, he wouldn't have come back at all. The key was that these divine sense ice threads had already surrounded the entire place without leaving any blind spots. This place had already become an out-and-out cage. It was obvious that Bing Wuqing did not want to deal with the primordial giant lizard alone. Unless the two of them worked together to finish off this brainless beast, Shui Jianfeng would not be able to leave this place. "Is this your new move?" Shui Jianfeng asked in a low voice. "Of course not," Bing Wuqing replied calmly. Bing Wuqing replied impassively. She had learned this move a long time ago. It was just that she had been limited by her abilities in the past, and the most she had been able to do was to create some scattered strands. She had been unable to weave a densely packed cage of ice silk like she was doing now. "What is it?" Shui Jianfeng asked again. "Merciless ice threads." Bing Wuqing didn't hide anything. This was an ultimate move that was derived from the merciless ice force. All along, she had focused her cultivation on the merciless ice force, and all the moves she had cultivated were based on it. It was the same for the merciless ice threads. Shui Jianfeng did not say another word. Although his abilities were no longer below Bing Wuqing's on the surface, he had progressed too quickly after all, and one of the unavoidable drawbacks was his lack of foundation. He was still unable to master many of the powers at the level of Golden Core perfected, especially when it came to divine sense, which was a huge weakness. Therefore, these merciless ice threads formed from divine sense could be said to be helpless. Although Wuqing had made her abilities quickly, she was still in the early stage of the merciless golden spirit. And Bing Wuqing was also. Bing Wuqing had much better. At this moment, the primordial giant lizard, Bing Wuqing, Shui Jianfeng, and Fei Yangxing were all trapped in the cage of ice threads. The palm-sized space had become an open-air arena. Either the primordial giant lizard would die, or all three of them would die together. There was no other outcome. Strictly speaking, the cage of ice threads could trap Shui Jianfeng and Fei Yangxing, but not Bing Wuqing herself. However, it would take some effort for him to pass through the merciless ice threads. Obviously, Shui Jianfeng would not give him the chance to escape. Although the primordial giant lizard was frightening, if Bing Wuqing and Shui Jianfeng could work together sincerely, it would not be too much trouble for them. Unfortunately, the two of them had their own ulterior motives. It was already noble of them not to cause trouble for each other. From the beginning to the end, they had only been doing one thing, and that was to find a way to transfer the primordial giant lizard's hatred to each other. However, what was surprising was that Fei Yangxing managed to survive in such an environment. It was probably because his abilities were too weak. Even if he tried hard to transfer the primordial giant lizard's hatred to him, it would not last for more than a few seconds. Therefore, Bing Wuqing and Shui Jianfeng subconsciously treated him as if he was invisible, and he managed to escape. After half an hour, the battle had completely entered a white-hot stage. Because of the mutual shirking, Bing Wuqing and Shui Jianfeng were completely at a disadvantage against the primordial giant lizard. Both of them were covered in dirt, while the primordial giant lizard was becoming more and more ferocious. If this continued, the two of them might end up as the primordial giant lizard's food. "Brothers, stop fooling around. Can't you deal with this lizard first before you fight amongst yourselves? Otherwise, we're all going to die." Fei Yangxing shouted anxiously at the side. If Bing Wuqing and Shui Jianfeng were defeated, he would not survive either. Bing Wuqing and Shui Jianfeng looked at each other. They knew that they could not go on like this. It would be a joke if they died here together. Bing Wuqing took the lead and said, "You hold it back, I'll be the main attacker." "Alright." Shui Jianfeng agreed immediately. He had a high-level movement technique like traceless snow steps, so it was not difficult for him to hold the primordial giant lizard back for a short period of time. Furthermore, it did not take much effort for him to do so. On the other hand, Bing Wuqing, who was the main attacker, was more physically draining, so he had the upper hand. The two of them worked together, and the results were immediate. Once Shui Jianfeng had completely attracted the primordial giant lizard's attention, Bing Wuqing gathered her strength for a moment and suddenly struck. She used her palm as a blade, and cold air surged from it, quickly condensing into an extremely thin dark blue ice blade. She aimed it at the primordial giant lizard and slashed it down. Merciless slash. The primordial giant lizard's reaction was not slow, and it quickly dodged when it sensed the danger. Unfortunately, its huge body became an absolute burden at this moment. No matter how fast it was, it could not completely evade the attack, and the dark blue ice blade hit its tail squarely. Previously, Shui Jianfeng's full-powered slash had not been able to break through the defense of its silver-gray scales. However, this time, it was Bing Wuqing's merciless slash that severed its entire tail. Blood splattered everywhere, and the lizard howled in pain. "It's done!" Fei Yangxing was overjoyed at the sight, but he was immediately dumbfounded. Not only did the primordial giant lizard not collapse after its tail was severed, it became even more berserk than before, going on a rampage even more thoroughly. Fuck. It's not dead even after that? Shui Jianfeng was caught off guard, and he was sent flying by a claw. Fortunately, the lizard's saliva did not touch him, or he would have been dead. Chapter 5283. Faced with such a ferocious beast that did not conform to common sense, everyone was at a loss. If Bing Wuqing and Shui Jianfeng had joined forces, they might have had a chance of winning, but the problem was that it was already rare for them to work together. Shui Jianfeng had suffered a great loss this time, and it was impossible for him to restrain the even more violent primordial giant lizard. The situation took a turn for the worse, and everyone was in a precarious situation. If this continued, they would all be wiped out and buried in the primordial giant lizard's bloody mouth. At this moment, 3 figures appeared in front of everyone. Fei Yangxing was overjoyed to see them. They were none other than Lin Yi, Duanmu Yu, and the water lily clone who was in charge of leading the way. Because the water lily clone couldn't communicate with the plants that had been contaminated by the primordial monitor lizard's saliva, the only way for them to find the primordial monitor lizard's whereabouts was to use the elimination method to calculate the primordial monitor lizard's territory and then try their luck there. If they had to rely on this stupid method, it would have taken them at least a day to find the primordial giant lizard. Fortunately, Bing Wuqing had lured the primordial giant lizard out, and they had calculated its location based on the plants that they had lost contact with. Lin Yi glanced around and frowned. He had thought that the primordial giant lizard was chasing after cold, but there was no cold here at all. Instead, he saw Bing Wuqing and the other 2. "Senior, save us!" Fei Yangxing hurriedly shouted. Ever since he had subdued the water lily protector, Lin Yi was almost invincible in his eyes. In his opinion, as long as Lin Yi attacked, the primordial giant lizard would not be a problem. He's just a foundation building great completion, what's the use? Shui Jianfeng was full of disdain. Even he and Bing Wuqing, 2 gold core great completion cultivators, had been tormented by the primordial giant lizard. What use would Lin Yi be? Lin Yi did not comment. If the primordial giant lizard had only targeted Shui Jianfeng, he would not have given it a second glance. But Bing Wuqing was here. She was his people, and he could not ignore her. "You want to save them?" Duanmu Yu was a little hesitant. She did not know about the relationship between Bing Wuqing and Lin Yi. She only knew that both Shui Jianfeng and Bing Wuqing had a grudge against Lin Yi. There was no need for him to risk his life to save them. After all, the primordial giant lizard was no joke. "It's nothing. It's nothing." As Lin Yi spoke, his figure flashed as he charged forward. "Be careful of the ice threads." Bing Wuqing hurriedly reminded him, but before she could finish, Lin Yi had already disappeared without a trace. When he reappeared in the next instant, he was already inside the ice cage, riding on the head of the berserk primordial giant lizard. This scene caused everyone's eyelids to twitch. That was a primordial monitor lizard. Just a little bit of its saliva and it would be finished. Wasn't Lin Yi a little too daring? "You're courting death. You're still trying to act tough at a time like this." Shui Jianfeng snorted disdainfully. Even a golden core perfected expert like him would not dare to be so arrogant. It was obvious that Lin Yi was trying to act tough in front of Duanmu Yu. Otherwise, why would he be riding on the head of the primordial giant lizard for no reason? However, Lin Yi ignored him. He grabbed the primordial giant lizard's head with one hand. Everyone thought that he was going to use some powerful martial arts technique, but unexpectedly, his entire hand sank into the head without any resistance. The scene was rather strange. After a while, the furious primordial giant lizard suddenly quietened down. Lin Yi slowly withdrew his hand, and when it was completely withdrawn, everyone realized that there was a ring of something gray on his hand. What is that? Fei Yangsheng could not help but ask. Primordial spirit. Bing Wuqing and Xue Jianfeng gasped at the same time. Lin Yi had actually grabbed the primordial giant lizard's primordial spirit out, and the whole process was so easy. It was simply unimaginable. It's done. Lin Yi casually tossed the ball of primordial spirit in his hand into the space in the jade pendant, and then clapped his hands as if nothing had happened. It gave the impression that he had not dealt with a ferocious beast like the primordial giant lizard, but rather that he had casually picked up a piece of trash. That was all. Everyone looked at each other, and the whole place was dead silent. Apart from the sound of gulping, no one could say a word for a long while. Looking at the primordial giant lizard lying motionless on the ground, Xue Jianfeng swallowed hard. He looked at Lin Yi in shock and stammered, How? How did you do it? Lin Yi glanced at him. He said calmly, It's just a brainless spirit beast. Is it that difficult? It's very difficult. Bing Wuqing said seriously. Xue Jianfeng and Duan Mu had the same expression. It was true that the primordial giant lizard was an extremely brainless spirit beast. While its individual strength was incomparably strong, its primordial spirit was in stark contrast to its incomparably weak primordial spirit. It was no exaggeration to say that the primordial giant lizard, which was superior to most golden elixir perfected experts, had a primordial spirit that could not even compare to an ordinary person's. It might even be weaker than a 3-year-old child's. Even so, a primordial spirit was not something that could be pulled out easily. Unless the primordial spirit left its body on its own accord, no matter how weak the primordial spirit was, as long as it hid in its body, it would still be impregnable. At least to everyone's knowledge, there had never been such a case. To give a simple example, golden elixir perfected experts like Bing Wuqing and Xue Jianfeng could easily kill a bunch of ordinary people with a flick of their fingers. However, it was impossible for them to pull out an ordinary person's primordial spirit out of thin air. Even if it was a nascent soul-old monster, it would be hard to say. The most difficult part was how to completely cut off the connection between the primordial spirit and the body. This connection was inextricably linked and inseparable. It was just like when a person was on Earth, they would inevitably be firmly bound by gravity at all times. Wanting to completely separate a primordial spirit from its body was equivalent to throwing a person directly into space from the surface of the Earth. Only then could one truly break free from gravity. One had to know that Lin Yi himself was only a primordial spirit. He did not have a booster like a rocket. No matter how strong he was, it was impossible for him to throw a person into space with his bare hands, right? However, the reality was right there. No one knew how Lin Yi had done it, but he had indeed done it. Just thinking about the meaning of this was enough to make one shudder. Chapter 5284. Little did he know that he was overthinking. Lin Yi's technique could only be used on brainless beasts like the ancient giant lizard. It was useless against a golden core expert of his level. Even a foundation establishment expert would not be affected at all, let alone a golden core expert. It could only be used to deal with ordinary people. However, Xue Jianfeng did not know this. He was now like a bird startled by the mere twang of a bow. He was extremely fearful. Even though he was a golden core perfected expert now, his divine sense had not made any substantial progress. It was almost his weakest link, so he had no choice but to be fearful. Seeing Lin Yi's gaze sweep over, Xue Jianfeng immediately shivered. Afraid that he would have evil thoughts, he quickly forced a smile and said, "Thank you for your help." Although he said so, in his heart, he could not wait to quickly think of a way to kill Lin. Biting the hand that feeds him, this guy was a typical ingrate. "No need, I'm not here for you." Lin Yi pursed his lips. "Then let's part ways here." Xue Jianfeng was extremely cautious when he said this, afraid that Lin Yi would suddenly attack him. Although there was Bing Wuqing, a friend, present, And he did not believe that a foundation establishment perfected expert like Lin Yi could defeat a golden core perfected expert like him. The scene just now was too shocking. This guy could not be calculated with common sense. As expected, Lin Yi had no intention of letting him go just like that. He stretched out his hand to stop him. What do you want? Shui Jianfeng immediately felt as if he was facing a formidable enemy. At the same time, he desperately winked at Bing Wuqing, hoping that she would help him deal with Lin Yi. Even though they had their own ulterior motives when dealing with the ancient giant lizard, they were both members of the organization. He believed that Bing Wuqing would not turn against him over such a matter of principle, because that would be equivalent to betraying the organization. Little did he know. Bing Wuqing was not one of his people at all, but one of Lin Yi's people. He was really thinking too much. Where's Lung Ling? Lin Yi stared at him with an unfriendly expression. Although he didn't know what would happen after arriving at the primordial monitor lizard's territory, one thing was certain. Before this, there was no doubt that Shui Jianfeng had been chasing after Lung Lung. It would be fine if Lung Lung was safe and sound, but if anything were to happen to her, Lin Yi would never let Shui Jianfeng off today. She escaped long ago. Shui Jianfeng hurriedly answered. Really? Lin Yi was skeptical. He ordered the water lily clone not far away. Check it out. Shui Jianfeng was stunned when he heard that. Only now did he finally notice the unfamiliar face beside Duan Muyu, and he couldn't help but be secretly surprised. Where did this person come from? He had more or less an impression of all the disciples who participated in the trial, but there was no such person. Moreover, Lin Yi actually asked him to investigate Lung Lung's matter. How was he supposed to investigate? At this moment, Bing Wuqing stepped forward to testify. Cold did escape. I saw her leave with my own eyes. Is that so? Lin Yi heaved a sigh of relief. He didn't have to think to know that it was Bing Wuqing who saved Lung Lung from Shui Jianfeng's hands. At this moment, the water lily clone also said, that woman escaped safely and has now met up with the group from before. That's good. Lin Yi nodded. Can I leave now? Shui Jianfeng didn't dare to stay any longer. Without waiting for Lin Yi's reply, he quickly retreated. At the same time, he said to Bing Wuqing in dissatisfaction, aren't you going to remove your stupid cage? Bing Wuqing frowned when she heard that and glanced at Lin Yi. Seeing that Lin Yi didn't object, she then waved her hand to remove the merciless ice threads. Shui Jianfeng used the spectral snow steps without hesitation and disappeared without a trace in the blink of an eye. For him, it seemed that the current Lin Yi was far more frightening than the primordial giant lizard. Lin Yi looked thoughtfully at the direction in which this guy had left. Actually, Shui Jianfeng deserved to die 100 times for daring to attack Lung Lung and the others. It was just that Lin Yi's current strength and realm were too low. It was easier said than done to deal with an expert of golden core perfected. Of course, it wasn't impossible to really fight. After all, he also had Bing Wuqing, who was of golden core perfected, on his side. The key problem was that Lin Yi's current state was like an arrow at the end of its flight. He couldn't do anything. However, Lin didn't show any of it on his face. He still maintained his calm demeanor. He looked at Bing Wuqing and asked, what's up with this guy? It seems like there's something he can't let us know. Thinking about it carefully, Shui Jianfeng's behavior just now was actually very unusual. It was true that he was shocked by Lin Yi's shocking means, but he was still an expert of golden core perfected. Moreover, Bing Wuqing was with him in name. There was absolutely no need for him to be afraid of Lin Yi, and there was no need for him to put on such a fleeing posture. There must be something going on. That's right. Ever since he entered this primordial trial ground, he has been acting suspiciously. I was also very puzzled, so I have been following him. It's just that until now, I still haven't figured out his intentions. Bing Wuqing nodded. It was also because of this that she could save Lung Lung in time. Otherwise, with the primordial trial ground being so huge, how could there be such a coincidence? He didn't notice you? Lin Yi was a little surprised. Both of them were experts of golden core perfected. Even if Bing Wuqing had a deeper foundation, she shouldn't have been able to follow them all the way without being noticed. No matter what, Shui Jianfeng wasn't an ordinary person. His senses shouldn't be so slow, right? I have this. Bing Wuqing raised her hand. An invisible ice thread was wrapped around her fingertip, which was connected to the direction that Shui Jianfeng had left. There was no doubt that the other end of the thread was on Shui Jianfeng. No wonder. Lin Yi suddenly understood. With this merciless ice thread as a guide, Bing Wuqing only had to follow far behind. There was no need for her to get close to the other's sensing range. As long as Shui Jianfeng didn't notice this trick, she would never be able to escape his tracking. Then Bing Wuqing consulted. Do as you wish. Continue to keep an eye on him. I happen to be worried about this guy anyway. Lin Yi waved his hand. Since Shui Jianfeng dared to attack Leng Leng and the others, there would be a second time. With Bing Wuqing keeping an eye on him, it would be good to eliminate this hidden danger. Besides, if Bing Wuqing kept following him, it would be troublesome if she was seen by others. All right. Bing Wuqing responded, but she didn't leave immediately. Instead, she turned her gaze to the other people present. The first to bear the brunt was Fei Yangxing, who was the closest. Chapter 5285. Fei Yangxing's expression gave Bing Wuqing a clear message. This guy was not Lin Yi's man. Her relationship with Lin Yi could not be exposed yet, so to be safe, she might as well kill him to silence him. Once she was determined to kill, Bing Wuqing's merciless ice aura broke out of her body. Bing Wuqing had always been a clean and efficient person. As long as Lin Yi did not stop her, Fei Yangxing would not live to see tomorrow's sun. Thump. Fei Yangxing was so frightened that he knelt on the spot. He hurriedly begged for mercy. Masters Junior, I have admired Senior Lin since a long time ago. On account of the fact that I used to run errands for Senior Lin, please recommend me to join Senior Lin's team. I will go through fire and water, and sacrifice my life for him. Fei Yangxing wasn't an idiot. He'd be going to meet the King of Hell if he didn't show his loyalty now. He'd called himself Lin Yi's follower just to make himself look good, and he didn't have any qualms about this at all. In fact, it was exactly what he'd been looking for. Bing Wuqing looked at Lin Yi. Lin Yi thought about it and decided that he did not mind having such a little brother. However, he did not trust Fei Yangxing's character, so he took out a poisonous insect and threw it to him. Eat this. Fei Yangxing took it without hesitation and swallowed it. Of course, he knew that it was not something good, but he could not hesitate at this moment. Anyway, no matter what poison it was, as long as he did not betray Lin Yi, his life would not be in danger in the short term. Fei Yangxing passed the test successfully, but Bing Wuqing's eyes fell on Duanmu. He did not care whether she was Yi Ling Sek's senior sister or not. If she was not one of them, he would kill her. Duanmu was startled. She could clearly feel the murderous intent emanating from Bing Wuqing, and with her current strength, she was completely defenseless in front of the other party. She hurriedly assured them, "Don't worry, I won't go out and tell anyone." Bing Wuqing turned to Lin Yi for advice. To him, such a promise was nonsense. The most untrustworthy thing in the world was an empty promise. Whether Duanmu could live or not did not depend on what she swore, but on Lin Yi. It's fine. Forget about her. Lin Yi thought for a while and waved his hand. His previous experience had given him a good impression of Duanmu. Although she was a woman, she was straightforward, a little like a tomboy. Moreover, from the fact that she had come forward to save Fei Yangxing, whom she had no friendship with, it could be seen that this woman was very loyal. With her character, she would not spread the news. To be honest, in Lin Yi's opinion, Duanmu was much more reliable than Fei Yangxing. Even Fei Yangxing, who had taken the goo poison and become his underling, might not be as reliable as Duanmu, an outsider. Duanmu breathed a sigh of relief and looked at Lin Yi with a complicated expression. While he felt that this person was more and more unfathomable, he inexplicably trusted him more. After all, trust was mutual. When someone trusted you, you would naturally have a corresponding sense of trust for that person. Following that, Bing Wuqing's gaze turned towards the water lily clone. However, this time, she didn't have to ask anything. Lin Yi took the initiative and said, "Don't bother about it. That fellow is a spirit beast that I've just subdued." Spirit beast? Bing Wuqing paused for a moment. After a moment, her expression suddenly changed, and she said in shock, "Could it be the mastermind behind those plants?" He had followed Shui Jianfeng all the way here. Shui Jianfeng had suffered at the hands of those plants, so naturally he was no exception. Even now, he was still a little frightened by the dangers involved. That's right. Let me introduce you. This is the water lily protector of this place. Lin Yi smiled faintly. Its true form is actually a water lily. How rare. Bing Wuqing's reaction was exactly the same as Shui Jianfeng's. You and that human expert from just now are quite strong. However, you escaped because I didn't really make a move. Otherwise, you wouldn't have survived until now, the water lily protector said with a disdainful expression. This was the truth. Unless Bing Wuqing and Shui Jianfeng could crack the mirage reflection and find its true form like Lin Yi did, and at the same time, they had to have a method like the space in the jade pendant to imprison its true form so that its rippleless ancient well would lose its effect. Otherwise, no matter how many experts in golden core grade attainment came, it would be useless. Bing Wuqing was skeptical about this, but deep down, her respect for Lin Yi grew. After all other things aside, the water lily protector's strength was undeniable. Lin Yi could even subdue such a spirit beast. There was really no one else with such skills. Then I'll leave first. Bing Wuqing bade farewell to Lin Yi and was about to leave right away. Wait a minute, bring Fei Yangxing along. It's not convenient for him to follow me, and he happens to be from your Snow Sword sect. No one will suspect anything if he follows you, Lin Yi instructed. All right. Bing Wuqing nodded, glanced at Fei Yangxing and said, follow closely. Don't blame me if you get lost. Yes, I'll definitely follow closely, Fei Yangxing hurriedly said. Since Lin Yi had spoken, he had to follow Bing Wuqing closely, even if it meant risking his life. Otherwise, if he was really left alone, how could he leave this damned place alive, where danger lurked everywhere? Bing Wuqing immediately left with Fei Yangxing. Now, only Lin Yi, Duan Muyu, and the water lily clone were left. Duan Muyu asked, what do you plan to do next? Continue to look for Cold and the others, or go directly to the River of Divine Knowledge. Go to the River of Divine Knowledge. Anyway, they're heading towards the River of Divine Knowledge, so it'll be easier to find them there. Lin Yi paused and then said, but you have to wait for me to recover first. Recover what? Duan Muyu did not understand for a moment. But Lin Yi did not speak, and directly stored the water lily clone into the space in the jade pendant. Then he laughed bitterly and said, I'm injured. Injured? Duan Muyu was shocked. Since coming out of the water lily protector's nest, she had been with Lin Yi the whole time. Apart from easily subduing the primordial giant lizard's primordial spirit, she had not seen him make a move. Just now. As Lin Yi spoke, he had already sat down cross-legged. Then, something appeared in his hand. It was the water droplet that he had obtained from the kappa, which was specially used to heal the primordial spirit. Duan Muyu didn't have a clue what was going on. Lin Yi had looked like he was dealing with the ancient giant lizard with ease, and it had only been one hit from start to finish. The lizard didn't show any signs of resistance at all, so how was it injured? You want to know? Lin Yi relied on the water droplet to heal his primordial spirit as he looked up at her. Chapter 5286. The move I used to restrain the primordial giant lizard's primordial spirit is called the soul hooking hand, Lin Yi said truthfully. Soul hooking hand? Hearing this word, Duan Muyu felt an inexplicable chill run down her spine, and she could not help but say, why does it sound like a move of a heretic cultivator? That's right, this is a move of a heretic cultivator. I was once chased by an extremely powerful heretic cultivator on Heaven Stage Island. He wanted to use the soul hooking hand to restrain my primordial spirit and then turn me into a puppet, Lin Yi said with a smile. He was talking about the West Mountain Sect Master. Since it's a move of a heretic cultivator, why do you also know it? Are you also a heretic cultivator? Duan Muyu subconsciously took a step back. Heretic cultivators were not only present on Heaven Stage Island, but also in the ancient Jianghu. Moreover, they were also existences that everyone wanted to kill. Do you think I'm a heretic cultivator? Lin Yi was a little speechless. No. Duan Muyu shook her head decisively. She had seen everything that Lin Yi had done. Although his various methods were unfathomable, they were completely different from being a heretic cultivator. If even Lin Yi was a heretic cultivator, then there would be a sea of heretic cultivators in this world. Then that's it. Lin Yi curled his lips. But since you're not a heretic cultivator, how do you know the moves of a heretic cultivator expert? Duanmuyu was puzzled. I have a deep impression of the soul hooking hand. During this period of time, I just happened to be in the primordial spirit state, and coincidentally encountered a bottleneck. Since I had nothing to do anyway, I began to explore all kinds of messy divine sense skills, and more or less gained some results, Lin Yi said. So you learned the soul hooking hand? Duanmuyu was dumbfounded. Although she had already seen Lin Yi's amazing insight when he was dealing with the water lotus protector, in her knowledge, no matter how talented a super genius was, he had to learn any martial arts from the beginning. How could he figure it out by himself after seeing someone use it once? At the very least, it wouldn't be a problem if it was in the small Jianghu of immemorial era. After all, the top experts in the small Jianghu of immemorial era were only nascent soul old monsters. If they were compared to the schools in the secular world, they would at most be at the level of junior high school, and they would only be at the basic level. Students at this level would naturally need to learn step by step, and no matter how talented they were, they wouldn't be able to come up with any new tricks. But Lin Yi was different. He was a mysterious ascending stage master, and he was able to kill a mountain opening stage master. He was a genius among geniuses. Even if he wasn't a proper university student, he was at least a high school student. Different levels, naturally different horizons. Junior high school geniuses were at most able to learn quickly and well, but high school geniuses had already entered the level of knowing an answer and being able to reverse deduce a whole set of answers on their own. I can't say that I've completely learned it. At most, it's just a beginner's understanding of it. Lin Yi said it very modestly, but it wasn't a lie, because what he had figured out now was at most an incomplete version of the soul hooking hand, and its power was far less powerful and terrifying than the Shishan Old Master. Not only could the target not be higher than the foundation establishment stage, but more importantly, every time he used it, he would suffer an extremely serious spirit backlash. If it weren't for the water droplets that were specially used to heal the spirit, Lin Yi wouldn't dare to use it at all. Even so, Duanmuyu was shocked speechless. What kind of freak was this? Why are you willing to tell me this? Duanmuyu asked hesitantly. Not only the current soul hooking hand, but also the space in the jade pendant. These were all Lin Yi's secrets. Logically speaking, unless it was someone closest to him, according to the usual rules of the cultivation world, he would not reveal it to outsiders even if he was beaten to death. Why would he take the initiative to tell him this? Lin Yi thought about it very seriously, then shrugged indifferently and said, "No reason, I just feel that you're a reliable person, so I came to you on a whim." Do you really trust me that much? Duanmuyu couldn't help but ask in surprise. Are you not worthy of my trust? Lin Yi asked rhetorically. Duanmuyu choked for a long time, then shook his head speechlessly and said, I really can't see through you. The more powerful a person was, the more shrewd they were. This was human nature, but he didn't expect Lin Yi to be completely different. This guy seemed to be born to break common sense. No matter what he did, he was always so unexpected and subversive. Wouldn't it be troublesome if I was so easily seen through by others? Lin Yi chuckled. As he spoke, the water droplet in his hand had completely evaporated. To be precise, it was absorbed by him. Lin Yi immediately stood up, full of energy. His condition was much better than before he was injured. Not only was his injury completely healed, but he also seemed to have made some progress. However, it was only a slight improvement. He was still far from breaking through the barrier of the great perfection of the foundation establishment stage. TSK, this water droplet is really good stuff. If it weren't for the fact that the Kappa tribe was almost exterminated by that bastard guardian lotus, I might have been able to get a few more. What a pity. Lin Yi couldn't help but sigh. Don't you still have a holy water droplet? Duanmuyu glanced at him. Now that the guardian lotus had fallen into Lin Yi's hands, the holy water droplet in its hand naturally fell into Lin Yi's hands. It originally wanted to use the holy water droplet to bargain and regain its freedom. Unfortunately, it was trapped in the space of the jade pendant and didn't have the right to do so. Lin Yi took out the holy water droplet with just a thought. How could it bargain? Yes, but it's still a pity, isn't it? With a wave of his hand, Lin Yi took out the holy water droplet. He held it in his hand and looked it up and down carefully. Although the crack was a pity, the flaw did not obscure the beauty. The purity and holiness it exuded was still intoxicating. One holy water droplet is worth at least dozens or even hundreds of ordinary water droplets. You're really greedy, Duan Muyu commented. She didn't have any ulterior motives for the holy water droplet. After all, her need for it was far less urgent than Lin Yi's. Moreover, it was the spoil of war from subduing the guardian lotus, so it should belong to Lin Yi alone. Everyone in the world is greedy. What's so strange about me being greedy? Lin Yi smiled, then looked at the holy water droplet and muttered thoughtfully, ordinary water droplets can help me improve while healing my injuries. If it's the holy water droplet, will it help me break through the barrier and advance to the gold core stage? You want to advance to the gold core stage? Duan Muyu looked surprised again. Don't you want to? Lin asked. Chapter 5287. I'm a primordial spirit, so my situation is different from yours. I can't explain it clearly in a few words. Lin Yi smiled bitterly and shook his head while studying the holy water bead. It was true that the effect of the holy water bead was hundreds of times better than ordinary water beads, but it could not change its nature of healing primordial spirit injuries. The little improvement just now could only be regarded as a side effect. Based on this, even if he used the holy water bead, there was more than an 80% chance that he would not be able to step into the gold core stage. No matter how he studied various primordial spirit methods, stopping at the foundation establishment great perfection was a big problem. Duan Muyu wanted to say something but hesitated. However, when she thought about it, Lin Yi trusted her so sincerely, it did not seem right to hide it. However, this matter was confidential, and this kind of thing could not be disclosed to outsiders. Even fellow disciples had to guard against each other, let alone an outsider like Lin. What's wrong? Do you have something to say? Lin Yi looked at her with a little surprise. Duan Muyu gritted her teeth. If it was someone else, she would never say it casually, but as Lin Yi said, she was a loyal person. Not only did Lin Yi save her in danger, but he also trusted her so much. It would be unreasonable if she did not return the favor. Finally, she blurted out, "Do you know about the divine knowledge grass?" Divine knowledge grass? Lin Yi was stunned and then shook his head. What is that? A very unique elixir. It is said that it only grows near the river of divine knowledge. It is a top-grade elixir used to refine the divine sense. After taking it, it can refine the divine sense and make it reborn. It can even be used to refine the strongest gold core stage master. Duan Muyu could not hide the excitement and yearning on her face. The strongest gold core stage? Lin Yi could not help but be a little surprised and could not help but say, is the strongest gold core stage master of the ancient small Jianghu refined acquired. Duan Muyu took it for granted. Seeing Lin Yi's strange expression, he asked, is there a problem? There's no problem, but it's different from the Heaven Stage Island. Whether you can become the strongest gold core stage in the Heaven Stage Island is completely determined by the breakthrough process, and the most important thing is to refine the body, not the divine sense. It seems that it's a completely different branch from the small Jianghu in the immemorial era. Lin Yi said thoughtfully. One was to cultivate the fleshly body, while the other was to cultivate the divine sense. Although the two had different Daoists, to some extent, they had the same result. They were both experts of the gold core stage. Refine your body? What about divine sense? Duan Muyu had a strange look on his face. In the beginning, the Heaven Stage Island didn't pay much attention to spiritual sense cultivation. Basically, those below the nascent soul stage wouldn't go and cultivate it. Only when you reach a sufficiently high level will you pay attention to it. Of course, if it's a special mental cultivation method or a coincidence, then it's a different story. Lin Yi explained. Only those above the nascent soul stage can cultivate their divine sense? How can we make it in time? Duan Muyu was stunned. As far as she knew, the nascent soul old monster was already the top existence. According to what Lin said, wouldn't it mean that most people didn't need to cultivate their divine sense? No, there are still a lot of realms above the nascent soul stage waiting to be broken through. Moreover, on the heaven stage island, there are many experts above the nascent soul stage. This is normal. Lin didn't think there was anything wrong with this statement. Instead, he was a little surprised by Duan Muyu's reaction. Is it much earlier in the ancient small world? Duan Muyu was completely stunned by his words. There were still a lot of realms above the nascent soul stage, and the experts of that level were as many as the hairs on a cow. This almost completely subverted her understanding. After a while, Duan Muyu came back to her senses and said, "It's more than much earlier. In our ancient small world, we have to cultivate our divine sense systematically from the foundation establishment stage. Didn't Lung Lung mention it to you?" "I really didn't." Lin Yi shook his head. Lung Ling must have thought that he already knew about this, so she didn't mention it at all. However, now that he thought about it, it was no wonder that Master Lung Lung would give her that piece of star ink charcoal. According to the usual understanding of the Heaven Stage Island, Lin Yi thought that this kind of thing would only do harm to an expert in the early stage of the foundation establishment stage. It turned out that he was completely wrong. Once someone reached the foundation establishment stage, they would have to start cultivating their divine sense systematically. As long as the method was mastered, they would not be devoured by the star ink charcoal at all. This also showed that Lung Lung was indeed deeply in love with him. The star ink charcoal was a precious treasure that she needed for her own cultivation. Others could not get it no matter how hard they fought for it. However, when she didn't know if Lin Yi could survive, she did not hesitate to give it to Lin Yi. It was enough to show the depth of her love. Duan Muyu was speechless for a moment. She returned to the topic at hand and said, "The divine sense grass should be the best spiritual medicine in terms of divine sense. Since you're a primordial spirit, it might be able to help you break through the barrier." "It's possible. It's very possible." Lin Yi began to get a little excited. This was different from the holy water droplet. The holy water droplet was specifically used for healing, while the divine sense grass itself was used to temper and enhance divine sense. The effects of the two were completely different. While listening to Duan Muyu's words just now, he suddenly realized that the reason why he was stuck in a bottleneck for a long time without any progress was most likely because he had gone in the wrong direction from the beginning. Out of habit, ever since Lin Yi was projected to the secular world, he had always relied on the experience he had on the Heaven Stage Island to recover and enhance his strength. Moreover, to a certain extent, his primordial spirit was no different from his main body. The various organ structures that should be there were not a single thing wrong with him doing so. At least, the initial stage was still very smooth. However, a primordial spirit was a primordial spirit after all. There was a fundamental difference between it and the main body. Using the main body's set of cultivation methods was still passable in the beginning, but it would not work at all after that. In fact, it was very likely that even the smooth sailing at the beginning was not because of cultivation. It was most likely because there was an adaptation and recovery process after the primordial spirit projection. After this process was over, it would be useless to use the normal method of cultivation. Thinking about it carefully, it was not difficult to understand why he could still improve all the way to the current foundation establishment great perfection. This was because Lin Yi had been using the piece of star ink charcoal that Lung Lung gave him. He could continue to upgrade not because of normal cultivation, but because he had been absorbing the majestic divine sense energy in the star ink charcoal. When the divine sense energy of the star ink charcoal was almost consumed, Lin Yi began to consciously control it. He just happened to encounter a bottleneck that he could not overcome no matter what. This was a strong evidence. Chapter 5288. But for the current Lin Yi, just adjusting his thoughts was useless, because he only had a little bit of star ink charcoal's consciousness left, and there was no place to replenish it. It was like training with one's body, but there was no energy in the world. How was he supposed to train? Fortunately, he learned about the divine knowledge grass from Duan Muyu in time. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was a timely help. Lin Yi looked at her and asked, "Do many people know about the divine knowledge grass?" It's very rare, because the divine sense grass is a secret that has been passed down from my master. Even the ancient books related to this ancient trial ground don't have any records of it. Besides me, I'm afraid none of the other trial disciples know about it. Duan Muyu suddenly paused and said thoughtfully, "Now that you know about it, suddenly asking this, is it because you have some kind of crooked idea?" "What crooked idea?" Lin Yi froze for a moment, then reacted and laughed. "Do you think I'm that kind of person?" Duan Muyu smiled. Of course, she knew that Lin Yi was not such a person, otherwise she would not have taken the initiative to say it. "So, only you and I know about the existence of the divine knowledge grass. Why are you telling me such an important thing?" Lin Yi couldn't help but wonder. In the face of a rare heavenly material like the divine knowledge grass, it was normal for cultivators to fight to the death, and his relationship with Duan Muyu was far from inseparable. What was this woman thinking? No reason, just a whim. Duan Muyu's face showed a rare playfulness. Lin Yi suddenly blushed with shame. He didn't know that this woman had such a playful side in addition to being a tomboy. Women were really fickle creatures. To be precise, it should be considered as returning a plum for a peach. "I think you're a pretty good partner. You're trustworthy and trustworthy. At the very least, you won't have evil thoughts and kill me to seize my treasure," Duan Muyu explained with a serious expression. This was not just a whim, but a decision made after careful consideration. There were crouching tigers and hidden dragons in this ancient trial ground. There was the water lotus protector, the brain-eating insect envoy, and the ancient giant lizard. Each of them was an existence that was almost undefeatable. More importantly, there was a lord that was above them. Just thinking about it made one tremble in fear. Moreover, the divine knowledge grass was an extremely rare and precious heavenly treasure. Who knew what kind of terrifying spirit beast they would encounter? Even if he used his toes to think about the dangers involved, it would not be easy to collect the divine sense grass, so Duan Muyu had to find a reliable partner in any case, and Lin Yi was an excellent ready-made candidate. There aren't many people who can kill you. Why not find someone weaker than you to work with? This way, you won't have anything to worry about. Lin smiled. This was the truth. Although Duan Muyu was only at the foundation establishment great perfection, her Yi Ling sect martial arts techniques were extremely mysterious. If she really wanted to escape, even Xue Jianfeng and Bing Wuqing, who were at the gold core perfection, might not necessarily be able to kill her, let alone others. Then it's better not to find one. Duan Muyu rolled her eyes at him. Even her own strength was enough to protect herself at most. If she really encountered a terrifying spirit beast, it would be difficult for her to even protect herself. If she found someone weaker than her, wouldn't that be asking for trouble? Hee, that's true. How about this? After we find the divine knowledge grass, we split it in half. Lin Yi suggested. No problem. Duan Muyu had no objection to this. Although she was the one who provided the information about the divine knowledge grass, she did not know its specific location after all. She didn't even know if it really existed. Moreover, if they really encountered trouble, it would definitely be Lin Yi who would take the lead, so it was not a loss for her to take half. In that case, let's hurry up. Lin Yi immediately took the lead and walked forward, muttering faintly in his heart. Just now, Xue Jianfeng also hurried in this direction. Although it was not strange that everyone's destination was the river of divine knowledge, he always felt that things were not so simple. The two of them were not far from the location of the river of divine knowledge. In addition, Lin Yi could also pull out the water lotus doppelganger to show the way. Compared to others who could only follow the map, they could walk a lot less in vain. After only half a day, Lin Yi and Duan Muyu arrived at the legendary river of divine knowledge. When they saw the scene in front of them, both of them were shocked and could not say a word for a long time. In their previous expectations, since the river of divine knowledge was located in the deep mountains and dense forests, it would not be very big. At most, it would be an ordinary forest river, but they did not expect that it was not the case at all. The river of divine sense that was reflected in his eyes could only be described with a few words: magnificent and majestic. The surface of the river was shrouded in a faint layer of fog, and the other side could not be seen at a glance. Even Lin Yi's divine knowledge could not detect it. Even if the inexplicable fog interfered with the divine knowledge, it at least proved that the river of divine knowledge was more than several kilometers wide. No one has been here before. Lin Yi carefully looked around the coast and found no traces left by human cultivators. It could be seen that even if someone came to the river of divine knowledge, they would definitely not be in this area, but in another section of the river. But Duan Muyu paused and said doubtfully, "It is said that the river of divine knowledge can temper the divine knowledge, but I don't feel anything different about this river." In this primordial smelting trial, almost everyone had come for the river of knowledge. However, no one knew what mysteries the river of knowledge possessed or how to temper one's divine sense. Everything could only be figured out on the spot when they arrived. Maybe it's the effect of the river water? Lin Yi thought for a while and immediately dipped his hand in the river water. Not only did he carefully sniff it, but he also directly licked it with his tongue. This was a quite risky move. After all, no one knew what was wrong with the river of divine knowledge. What if the river water was poisonous? However, Lin Yi dared to try it rashly because he was a spirit body and had the holy water pearl in his hand. However, the result of the attempt made him speechless. This water was simply ordinary river water. There was nothing special about it. If he was an ordinary cultivator, it would not be surprising that he could not detect the mystery, but he was Lin Yi, and he was a spirit body that was most sensitive to divine knowledge energy. If this river water really had the effect of tempering the divine knowledge, how could he not feel it at all? Chapter 5289. Lin Yi glanced at her and immediately took out a wooden bowl from the jade pendant space, scooped a bowl full of river water and handed it to her. "Warrior, drink this bowl of spiritual knowledge river water." Duan Muyu rolled her eyes, took the wooden bowl and took a sip, smacking her lips while frowning. "Except for the slight bitterness, this is just ordinary river water. It can be seen that the key is definitely not in the river." Lin Yi concluded. "Then where is the key?" Duan Muyu asked. "In the river." Lin Yi was very sure. If this river of spiritual knowledge was just an ordinary river, he would definitely not think so, but this river was not only extremely wide, but it was also shrouded in a layer of inexplicable fog. No matter how he looked at it, it was unusual. If there was nothing strange about it, Lin Yi would feel strange instead. "Do you want to go down and have a look?" Duan Muyu asked. Although the river could not be seen at a glance, the nearby river water was still very clear, and even the bottom of the river could be seen at a glance. If they just explored near the shore, even if they encountered danger, they could escape in time. There should not be any big problems. It's best not to do this unless it's a last resort. Lin Yi shook his head decisively. Although he couldn't say why, his intuition told him that this river was definitely not simple. If they rashly went down the river, they might encounter a terrible crisis. "But besides going down the river, what else can we do?" Duan Muyu said helplessly. "Let's not worry about the river of spiritual knowledge for now. Let's find the spiritual knowledge grass first." "Didn't you say it was near the river of spiritual knowledge?" Lin Yi suggested. The matter of the river of spiritual knowledge could be put aside for now. It would not be too late to figure out what to do next. In contrast, the spiritual knowledge grass was more important. If they could find the spiritual knowledge grass, it did not matter much whether the river of spiritual knowledge could temper the spiritual knowledge. "Not nearby, but in the river," Duan Muyu said. "In the river?" Lin Yi was surprised when he heard this and could not help frowning. Is the so-called effect of the river of spiritual knowledge referring to the spiritual knowledge grass? "That's possible." Duan Muyu nodded. The matter of the river of spiritual knowledge was only recorded in a very small number of ancient books, but there was no substantial conclusion that could be passed down. The so-called tempering of spiritual knowledge was only a very vague description. Maybe it was referring to the spiritual knowledge grass, but it was not clearly mentioned in the ancient books. "So we really have to go down there?" Lin Yi couldn't help but have a headache. His intuition was rarely wrong. Unless it was absolutely necessary, he really didn't want to go into the river. "That's not necessarily the case. We can wait for the river to ebb, then we can go down the river to find the spiritual knowledge grass, as long as we come up in time before the tide rises." Duanmu said. This was a method passed down by her master. Otherwise, it would not be so easy to find the divine sense grass growing in the river. All right. Lin Yi's eyes lit up. Such a wide and boundless river would definitely have high and low tides. Even if it was still risky to wait until the tide was low, it was much less risky than entering the river rashly. This method was feasible. After the two agreed on the plan, they meditated and rested by the river, while conserving their energy and waiting for the tide to ebb. Not long after, the river slowly receded, and the bottom of the river near the shore was revealed to the two. Lin Yi and Duanmu got up at the same time, glanced at each other, and went down the river to look for the divine sense grass. However, although the tide was ebbing, the river was not completely drained, only a small part of the riverbed was exposed. Lin Yi and Duanmu could only hurry up and search this part of the riverbed. When the tide rose, they would have to hurry back to the shore and wait for the next ebb. What the two did not expect was that the bottom of the river of spiritual knowledge was unexpectedly green, with all kinds of water plants everywhere. It was not easy to find the divine sense grass that they had never seen before. Even if Duanmu knew some of its general characteristics, it would not be easy. Let's take our time. There is no limit to the number of times we can search. This time we will first search a section, and next time we will search another section. If there really is a divine sense grass, I believe we will find something. Lin said. Then let's start from the deepest riverbed and wait for the tide to rise before we go to the shore. This way we will have a little more time. Duanmu suggested. Okay. Lin Yi nodded. The two immediately began to search the riverbed closest to the center of the river. This place was 3 or 4 miles from the shore, but even so, with Lin Yi's divine sense, he could not detect how wide the river was at the moment, let alone the boundary of the other side. This river of spiritual knowledge was really a bit wide. People who did not know might think it was a sea. This mud is a bit deep. Lin Yi frowned when he walked halfway. At this time, the mud had already reached his thigh. According to this, when they reached the farthest end, the mud would at least reach his chest. If it was an ordinary person, it would be extremely difficult to even move a step, let alone find the divine sense grass in this environment. Even if they waited until the tide rose, they would not be able to retreat, and even their lives would be lost in the river. However, this was only for ordinary people. For a master of the foundation establishment stage, it was nothing. At most, there would be some hindrance in their movements. Lin Yi was still a soul body. Although all the parts in his body were still there, his weight was much lighter than his body. As long as he controlled it a little, even if he stood on the mud, he would not sink. Of course, Lin Yi actually had a more convenient method, which was to transform into a soul body. However, he always felt that this place gave him an inexplicable sense of crisis. If something happened to his soul body, he might not even have a chance to react, so he did not dare to do this rashly. On the other hand, Duanmu was also calm, walking on the mud as if she was walking on flat ground. She looked more elegant and neat than Lin Yi, and she was also silent. Seeing Lin Yi looking at her in surprise, she smiled and explained, Silent Leaf Fall is a specialized light body martial technique of our Yi Ling sect. Very good. Lin Yi sincerely praised. This was not a compliment. With his insight, he could see the value of Silent Leaf Fall. Using it to deal with the mud was really overkill. This kind of silent light body martial technique could only show its greatest value in actual combat. As the eldest senior sister of Yi Ling sect, Duanmu was indeed not simple. Duanmu smiled slightly, and then began to carefully search for the divine sense grass in the omnipresent pile of water plants. Lin Yi also did not neglect. This place was not suitable to stay for long, and they had to move quickly. The two of them were very efficient, but even so, they still found nothing. When the tide rose, they returned to the shore empty-handed and looked at each other. Chapter 5290. Well, it's getting dark now. Let's conserve our energy and wait for the tide to ebb tomorrow morning before going to the next riverbed to look for it. Lin Yi nodded. Although they had gained nothing today, at least there was no unexpected danger. It could be seen that the idea of going down the river to look for it when the tide ebbs should be right. It was nothing more than whether they could find the divine knowledge grass in the end. This matter not only depended on effort, but also depended on luck. All the two of them could do was do their best. For safety reasons, the two did not stay on the shore for the night. Instead, they found a nearby big tree and made a medium-sized tree hole with their bare hands, so that they could rest in the hole with peace of mind. Lin Yi also deliberately summoned the water lily doppelganger to inquire about the whereabouts of Cold and the others. After confirming that everyone was not in danger for the time being and that they were all resting in a place not far from the river of divine knowledge, he was relieved. The night was quiet and there was no one around. A man and a woman alone in a tree hole. Most women would feel uncomfortable, but Duan Muyu did not have such concerns at all. While resting, she was also carefully looking at Lin. "Why are you looking at me?" Lin Yi could not help but stop in surprise. Are you practicing withered leaf rejuvenation?" Duan Muyu asked with a strange expression. Her perception was far more sensitive than ordinary people, and the chi fluctuations on Lin Yi's body just now were too familiar to her. Although she only said a little bit of the essence and did not reveal any cultivation method, it was reasonable to say that there should be no way to practice it, but the problem was that the other party was Lin Yi. Since this guy could even imitate the unique skill of the evil cultivator, the soul hook hand, let alone withered leaf rejuvenation? "Can't I?" Lin Yi looked at her and said, "I don't care. Anyway, even if you really practice it, it's your own exploration." Duan Muyu shrugged. Although it was a little irresponsible to turn a blind eye, it was their business how they wanted to explore and research, and she really couldn't control it. "Don't worry. Actually, I'm not really going to cultivate your leaf spirit sex spring rejuvenation. If I'm not wrong, your leaf spirit sex techniques complement each other. I'll have to cultivate them from the beginning. It's impossible for me to cultivate spring rejuvenation on my own, right?" Lin Yi speculated. "You can even guess that? You're really a freak." Duan Muyu could not help saying in surprise. Just as Lin Yi had said, the essence of all of leaf spirit sex techniques was a progressive progression, from shallow to deep. It was a very complete system. If one didn't grasp the essence of the basic techniques, no matter how talented they were, they wouldn't be able to cultivate an advanced technique like rejuvenation withered leaves. Of course, if one could even grasp the essence of rejuvenation withered leaves, then grasping the essence of the basic techniques would be a matter of course. They wouldn't need to cultivate it specifically. "You flatter me." Lin Yi chuckled. In fact, he was able to speculate this not just because he had extraordinary insight, but mainly because his real body's level was high enough and his horizons were broad enough. He had seen all kinds of mental cultivation methods and martial arts techniques, so his judgment was naturally accurate. "If you're not going to cultivate spring rejuvenation withered leaves, then what are you doing?" Duan Muyu could not help asking. "I vaguely feel that the essence of spring rejuvenation withered leaves is very useful to me, but I don't know how to use it specifically. I need to explore and study it carefully," Lin Yi said honestly. To put it bluntly, the essence of spring rejuvenation withered leaves was to forcibly awaken hidden vitality. To a certain extent, it was somewhat similar to the super physical skills and ultimate physical skills that he had previously mastered. However, there were also major differences. After all, the latter purely stimulated the physical body, allowing it to have a stronger reaction speed. It was impossible for it to be like spring rejuvenation withered leaves that could restore the vital qi in the body, let alone have the miraculous effect of self-healing. Comparing the two, it was obvious that spring rejuvenation withered leaves was much more exquisite. However, whether it was restoring vital qi or self-healing, these two miraculous effects of spring rejuvenation withered leaves were of little value to Lin. This was because not only did he know them, but he also had no sequelae. If he used spring rejuvenation withered leaves, he would definitely be in a weak state for a long period of time. That would be really fucked up. Lin Yi would not do something so stupid as to give up what was close at hand and seek what was far away. Of course, although it was of little value, Lin Yi still tried to figure it out. He wanted to master the trick and draw inferences. He did not need vital qi or healing, but if similar effects could be transferred to the primordial spirit, then it would be worth it. Don't forget that he was now a primordial spirit body. Duan Muyu silently looked at Lin Yi's various explorations and deductions. The profound mystery revealed from time to time really opened her eyes. This kind of feeling could be said to be unprecedented. Even her master had never made her unable to see through it. One had to know that her master was not an ordinary master of the Gold Core stage, but a real Yuanying stage old monster, standing at the top of the entire ancient small underworld. It was a pity that the top of the ancient small underworld was just like that. It was completely incomparable to the Heaven Stage Island. How could a mere Yuanying stage old monster be compared with a freak like Lin Yi who could even kill the giants of the mountain opening period? The two of them sat silently like this for a long time. Suddenly, Duanmu opened her eyes. She felt that Lin Yi's aura had inexplicably soared a lot in a moment, but now that she looked at it, there was nothing strange about Lin Yi's body, and there was no difference from just now. She couldn't help muttering, "Is it my illusion?" Lin Yi did not pay attention to her. It seemed that he was still immersed in his own exploration and deduction and was unaware of the outside world. Duanmu even believed that even if she stabbed him at this time, Lin Yi would not have the slightest reaction. Is this guy really insensitive, or is he too confident in me? Duanmu couldn't help but shake her head speechlessly. While continuing to meditate and rest, she carefully watched the movements outside. Since Lin Yi did not care about the outside world, this kind of thing could only be borne by her. What Duanmu didn't expect was that Lin Yi's sitting time was much longer than she expected. The tide hasn't ebbed yet? Lin Yi finally opened his eyes slowly, and a glimmer of light flashed in his eyes, but then he returned to normal. The tide hasn't ebbed yet? Big brother, it has already ebbed 5 times. Duanmu said angrily. What? Lin Yi was stunned when he heard this. He clearly just groped and deduced in his mind. It didn't take much time. Chapter 5291. Moreover, she did not dare to go down the river alone to find the divine sense grass. The key was Lin Yi's current state. Duanmu did not feel at ease leaving him alone, so she could only stay and accompany him patiently. In this kind of situation, anyone would be angry. 3 days? Lin Yi suddenly blushed with shame and quickly apologized with a smile. I'm sorry, I accidentally fell into a trance. Forget it, there is no time limit for this matter anyway, I'll just take it as a rest. Duanmu waved her hand generously, and then said with a bit of envy in her tone, but you are really amazing, you can casually enter a state of emptiness in this kind of place, your perception must be amazing, it's really enviable. After emptiness was an epiphany, and this state was a rare opportunity for every cultivator. Apart from a very small number of people, most people would only be able to enter a state of emptiness a few times in their lifetime. Even Duanmu had only experienced it once. It was during that moment of emptiness and epiphany that she was reborn, and she became the eldest senior sister who was the pillar of the entire Yiling sect in one go. In a place where danger lurked everywhere, Lin Yi was able to enter a state of emptiness so effortlessly. What was there to say about that? It's just a coincidence. Lin Yi said modestly, but his whole temperament was obviously much more brilliant than before. It could be seen that he must have gained something, and the harvest should not be small. If even a freak like you is so modest, how can we mortals live? Duanmu curled her lips and looked at the sky outside. According to the experience of the past 2 days, the tide should begin to ebb soon. Okay, then let's hurry up. Lin Yi nodded. Because of that sudden enlightenment, they had already missed 3 days of time. Neither of them wanted to waste any more time and immediately rushed towards the river of consciousness. Duanmu had already scouted the place 2 days ago, and had planned out the riverbed they would explore every day. Lin Yi only needed to follow her. After their first experience, the two of them were much more familiar with the path this time around. They had more or less learned about how to identify the aquatic plants, so their efficiency was clearly much higher. Last time, when the tide rose, the two of them had only explored less than 5 kilometers of the riverbed. Now, there was still more than half the time before the tide rose, but the two of them had already explored 5 kilometers. Their progress was much faster than they had expected. When they found about 15 miles, Lin Yi suddenly stopped. In the dense pile of aquatic plants not far ahead, there was a plant that was completely different from the other aquatic plants. The whole body was dark black and had no leaves. It was just a slender and narrow branch. The surface of the branch was densely covered with thorns. Because it was covered by other aquatic plants and silt, it looked inconspicuous at first glance, but it exuded an inexplicable dangerous light. Something that could make a master like Lin Yi feel danger was definitely not an ordinary plant. Divine knowledge grass. Lin Yi suddenly rejoiced. The various characteristics of this plant were exactly the same as what Duanmuyu had described before. There was no doubt that this was the divine knowledge grass. Really? Duanmuyu, who was not far away, heard Lin Yi's voice and quickly rushed over. Following the direction pointed by Lin Yi, she carefully observed the unique plant and then showed a look of ecstasy. Yes. This is the divine knowledge grass. This is the divine knowledge grass. Lin Yi himself wasn't completely sure at first, but since even Duanmuyu said so, then it was for sure. He said excitedly, "Let's hurry up and dig it out, it looks like the tide's about to rise." Duanmuyu nodded heavily and quickly went up to carefully clean up the whole divine knowledge grass. She found that its roots were deeply buried under the riverbed silt. No matter how hard she tried, she could not pull it out. She was a master of the foundation establishment great perfection. "You cut off the branches first, I will think of a way to get the roots," Lin Yi said when he saw this. If there was enough time, he could still think of a way. After all, a complete divine knowledge grass was better than a divine knowledge grass with broken roots. It was just that the high tide was imminent. No one knew what would happen after the high tide, so he could only act in a hurry. But Duanmuyu did not hesitate. She immediately took out a simple knife and was about to cut off the divine knowledge grass. However, at this moment, a strange-looking figure suddenly descended from the sky. An unparalleled airwave instantly sent the two of them flying. At the same time, it was accompanied by a familiar voice. "I finally found you." Brain-eating insect. Lin Yi was shocked. It wasn't easy for him to find the spirit grass, and he didn't even have time to be happy about it. He didn't think that his old enemy would find it at the last moment. His luck was really too good. Duanmuyu was also shocked. The brain-eating insect was in existence at the same level as the water lotus protector. With her strength, she was not even qualified to be cannon fodder. How could she encounter this monster at this time? Duanmuyu looked at the divine knowledge grass under the other party's feet. It was so easy to get, but she had missed it. She was really unwilling. Lin Yi was also extremely regretful. If he knew this would happen, he would not have avoided arousing suspicion. He should have put the divine knowledge grass directly into the jade pendant space when he found it. When the time came, he could have taken it out and split it with Duanmuyu. That way, he would not have ended up in this situation. At this time, the divine knowledge grass was being stepped on by the brain-eating insect. There was no chance to take it back. "I will find a way to stall it. You go first," Lin Yi said immediately. Now was not the time to worry about the divine knowledge grass. If he missed the divine knowledge grass, he could find it again, but if he lost his life here, then there would be nothing left. But Duanmuyu hesitated for a moment. Although she was a tough woman, she was not as open-minded as Lin. She felt unwilling to leave like this, but in the face of the power of the brain-eating insect, she had no choice but to grit her teeth and nod. Duanmuyu immediately retreated to the river bank, but before she could take 2 steps, a dozen tangible and invisible wind blades had already roared towards her. This was the innate skill of the ancient Gomeng clan. Duanmuyu was shocked. The power of any wind blade here could easily kill a golden core stage master, let alone a mere foundation establishment stage cultivator like her. Even Lin Yi did not dare to take such a strong attack head-on. If she wanted to save her life, she could only rely on herself.